Today's summary starts with her waking up late on the first day of university. She quickly gets up, gets ready, and heads out. We then see our hero, Joe, racing with his friend to see who will get to the university first. Later, Jan arrives at Charlie University, and at the same time, Joe arrives by car. He does this because the girls are waiting for Joe in front of the university. He's the most famous guy at the university, but very arrogant. Joe gets a call informing him that he has arrived and that there is a huge crowd waiting for him. The girls aren't planning to leave him today, so Joe is forced to enter the university through a back door. Afterward, Joe gets on the elevator with his clothes and he sees Jan running to catch the elevator. However, he doesn't stop for her because he thinks she's a fan chasing him. She has to take the stairs to avoid being late. Then she goes to the bathroom to change her clothes for an interview at the university. Joe is also looking for a place to change and finds a large billboard with his picture on it, so he changes behind it. Unfortunately, the workers take down the billboard while he's changing, and at the same time, Yan is watching the ad when Joe unexpectedly emerges from behind it, still in the middle of changing. She gets shocked and accuses him of being perverted. She runs away. Later, Joe heads to the university studio where he hosts a program, while Yan arrives at the director's office for her interview. The girl at the office introduces herself and says she knows Yan because she's the most famous girl in the science department and second in the class. Meanwhile, in the studio, Joe starts his program, which all the girls watch because of Joe, of course. Yan finishes her application form, but a girl tells her she's late, and the person who collects the forms is in the studio, so she has to deliver it herself. Yan reaches the studio and asks the person there to take her form, but he tells her he's busy and doesn't have time. Joe then talks about astrology on his program and asks if anyone would like to volunteer to come on stage with him. Everyone hesitate, and then the person who collects the forms tells Yan to go up to the stage so he will take her form. She goes on stage, but is shocked when she finds Joe standing in front of her. She responds angrily when he talks about her horoscope, and he tries to warn her that the button on her blouse is open. However, she thinks he's harassing her and slaps him, then runs away. Everyone is shocked by what they've seen. Later, Yan leaves the university but finds a group of girls chasing her, wanting to hit her because she slapped Joe. She hides from them and they can't catch her. Then she gets a phone call from work, as she has a delivery order. We see her calling her friend to help her prepare clothes. He calls and reminds him not to forget his aunt's birthday. After that, Yan arrives at his house to deliver his order. When she sees him, she tries to hide her face. She opens the delivery box, but it falls and breaks. Joe gets very angry because it was an expensive gift. Yan tries to apologize, saying that she will pay for it. At Joe's aunt's party, we see Shia, who is upset with Joe, but he ignores her. Mersey arrives at the party with Joe's cousin, Hannah. She says she's going to look for food, and he says he's going to look for girls. He finds 3 of his old friends whom he had told he was breaking up with them because he was sick. He hides with Hannah, but they manage to find him and confront him with the truth. Hannah tells them they are crazy for believing him, and then each one slaps him before leaving the party. Joe eventually meets Yan and thinks she's chasing him. However, she tells him she works after university and begs him not to tell their classmates. He asks how she plans to compensate for the expensive gift, showing her the high price. She is shocked by the price and can't believe it. He tells her she either pays or he will report her. Yan is scared but manages to convince him to let her pay in installments. He finally agrees. At the party, Joe's aunt arrives and asks about him. She calls him, and when he answers, she tells him to bring his girlfriend, who doesn't exist with him. He asks Yan to go with him as his girlfriend, and of course she agrees so he won't report her. He takes her to a big store and buys her a beautiful dress that catches the attention of everyone around. At the party, everyone notices him entering with Yan. Afterward, he forces her to dance with him, and they continue their dance after Yan adjusts her dress. After the dance, Joe introduces her to his aunt, but Yen lies about her name. Meanwhile, Shia is standing in the crowd looking at Yen with jealousy. Hannah asks Joe if he knows Yen, and he says he will go ask her. But she stops him after seeing Shia approaching them. Shia arrives and insults Yen, saying she's just a street girl. Joe disagrees and tells her not to judge people before getting to know them. He takes Yen and walks away. Yen mentions that Shia seems to like him, but Joe tells her to mind her own business and not interfere. Then someone comes to ask about Yen, and Joe dismisses the question, saying it has nothing to do with him. He introduces Yen to them, but when they try to greet her, Joe stops them, showing he's protective of her. Meanwhile, Joe's aunt is sitting with Hannah, and Shia comes in to ask about Yen and why she came to the party with Joe when they were fighting earlier in the morning. Shia shows her the video of Yen slapping Joe, But Joe's aunt laughs and tells Shia that Yan is just like her. Instead of separating them, the opposite happens. Shia leaves, embarrassed by what she did, and her plan fails. Joe's aunt asks Hana to get news about Yan and Joe. Hana decides to get Yan drunk to learn her story with Joe. She tries to get Yan to drink a lot to find out more, but Yan ends up spilling the truth. Afterwards, Yan returns home on the bus, but she remembers her agreement with Joe to pay him back. She then heads to the hospital to meet with Yan's sister, who she used her name to deal with Joe's aunt. She tells her the truth about her situation with Joe and admits she used her sister's name to ensure that she wouldn't get fired if Joe reported her. Yan explains that she decided to continue in her sister's college as well as her own, so everyone focuses now on understanding her story. Yan has a sister named Hana, who is in the economics department, while Yan herself is in the arts department. Hana had an accident after being accepted for a scholarship, so Yan had to take on her sister's identity to avoid losing the scholarship. Now we learn that Yan has been living two lives. When Yan enters Hana's dorm, she finds her roommate, who is also the president of Joe's fan club. She had seen Yan slap Joe earlier that morning and gets angry with Yan. She threatens her for hitting Joe, talking to her as if she were Hana. She even wants to kick her out of the room, but Yan explains that Joe had asked her to slap him as part of their plan for the program. The roommate warns her to avoid liking Joe because he's for Shia and no one else. Yan tries to calm herself so she doesn't hit the roommate and expose her secret. She decides to stay away from Joe so that he doesn't cause her more problems. The next morning, Joe and his friend Han are waiting for her outside the dorm. Yan sees them and tries to escape, but Joe spots her. At the university, Motzi asks Joe about the person who will win the Union Cup, and Joe tells him it's a girl named Han. But Motzi says he knows more about her and that she's in his department, and she also turned out to be second in the class. Joe tells him he's never seen her before. We return to Yan, still walking with Joe following her. He asks why she's been ignoring him lately. Of course, he's speaking to her as if she were Han, and he asks if he can walk her to class, counting her steps along the way. She tells him she's heading to class and leaves him behind. The lecture begins and the professor asks the students to form groups. All the girls want Joe to be in their group, and Shia is waiting for him to pick her. When the professor asks Joe who he will choose, he says he'll choose Yan. The professor insists that he pick Han instead. Joe is shocked because Yan had told him her name was Han. He grabs her book angrily because of the name and asks her why she lied to him and gave him a different name. Yan explains that she was trying to keep her identity a secret because she didn't want the girls to know she was with him. Joe tells her he will take revenge on her for lying. The other girls are jealous of Yan because Joe chose her over them. Hana also learns her true name and decides to ask her why she lied. Later, Yan tries to apologize to Joe, but Shia sees an opportunity and asks her a question to embarrass her. Yan handles it well, saying that Joe is the one who will answer. Of course, she acts like she doesn't understand anything, even though everyone knows she's second in her class. After the lecture, Yan goes to the cafeteria to have lunch. Motzi arrives and says that he's impressed with Han, Yan's sister, and asks her why she's been acting so strange lately. Yan tells him she's been feeling a little unwell and is also anxious about the competition, and he believes her. Hana sees them sitting together and is surprised. She decides to ask Yan about Joe again, but Motzi assures her that he will find out all the details and let her know. Meanwhile, Yan tells Motzi that she usually studies English at noon, but today she came earlier than usual. She mentions that she read online that studying on an empty stomach is difficult, but Motzi teases her, saying she doesn't seem like someone who browses the internet much. Yan tells herself she's probably never going to escape from him and worries about being exposed because of him. She tries to avoid his questions and suggests that they eat first and then study afterward. Hana tells Motzi that she will talk to Yan. At the same time, Joe arrives at the cafeteria and goes to Motzi's table. Hana reaches Yan and calls her over. Motzi asks Joe if Yan is his girlfriend, but Joe denies it. He explains that Hana is the one who stole the Union Cup from him, and that her real name isn't Loya, but Han, and that she won. Joe says he plans to take revenge on her for what she did. Yan takes Hana outside before she exposes her secret in front of Joe. Hana stops her and asks why she's been hanging out with Joe and why he's been calling her Han. Yan tries to come up with an excuse, saying that Joe is handsome, famous, and admired by all the girls, so she had to use a fake name when they went out together. Hana understands and tells her that they're just trying to keep their love a secret. Yan is relieved that Hana believes her lie. Meanwhile, Joe is with Motzi, warning him not to say anything to Hana. Afterward, he leaves and Hana calls out to him, saying she knows Yan is lying to everyone. Joe asks her what Yan told her, and Hana says she knows they secretly fell in love with each other but kept it hidden. Joe laughs at her for believing it. Later, we see Yan on her way to work, talking to herself, realizing that the situation is very difficult and she could be exposed, but then reminding herself that she's smart and knows how to handle things. She receives a message from Joe asking to meet, but she tells him she's busy and doesn't have time for him. He threatens her, saying that if she doesn't show up, he will increase the interest on her installment. Yen tells Joe that if he wants to meet her, he should come to her workplace, where she's working in a supermarket. Joe arrives and is angry with her for saying that they love each other in secret. Yan explains that her sister Hana was nagging her and wanted to know, and she didn't want to lie to her. Joe tells her that he has 3 rules for how they should behave until they break up. The first is that she should never tell anyone that they're pretending. The second is that she should avoid interacting with any of his friends or family. Yen agrees, saying that it's better that way. The third rule is that she should never call him at the university. Joe arrives at her workplace to buy fish, but complains that no one buys from her. Yan is surprised, asking how that's possible, and gestures toward Joe. She tells the customer that Joe had just asked her about salmon. When Joe tastes the fish, he refuses to open his mouth, so she threatens him that if he doesn't taste it, she will cancel the terms of their deal. Joe reluctantly eats the fish. The customer is impressed with the service and asks to taste it himself. Joe throws the fish into his mouth and asks him, "What do you think?" It's clear that he's frustrated with her. Later, Yan and Joe are in the library, and Joe senses that something is different about her. He mentions that she started caring about odd things. They both volunteer to organize the library, but unfortunately, they are interrupted by Joe and his group, which includes Shia. Shia orders Yan to bring a report on the damaged books in the library, but Joe tells her that he'll get it himself. He asks Yan to go with him to the storage room, and they walk together through the library. She keeps trying to avoid him, but then her phone rings and it's about her lecture. She leaves quickly, and Joe is confused since there are no lectures right now. When Yan reaches the lecture hall, she tries to sneak in from the back, but Shia spots her and asks what she was doing. Yen says she's interested in fashion design and is good at it. Meanwhile, Hana has told Joe's aunt that Yen has been lying to them, but the aunt is still happy with her because she's the first girl in Joe's life who might teach him some manners. However, the aunt says she wanted to get to know Yen more and suggests inviting her for lunch tomorrow. Joe is sitting with his friend Bill when he gets a call from his aunt, who tells him to bring Yan for lunch tomorrow. Yan, on the other hand, is sitting with her friend, complaining about the difficulty of her classes, but she'll continue for her sister's sake. She receives a message from her boss asking her to do advertisements for a store with a promise of doubling her pay. She goes and distributes the flyers. Then Joe comes to inform her about his aunt's invitation. Yan tells him she's not interested and pushes him away, accidentally tearing his shirt. Joe feels embarrassed walking around in his torn shirt, but Yin decides to buy him a new one. They go to a store, but the clothes there are expensive. Joe tries on different shirts, while Yan picks out a nice one for him. The shop assistant brings a shirt that's exactly what Joe asked for. Yan is shocked by the price, but tells him it's too expensive. Joe insists that the shirt looks good on him, but Yan argues that it's too pricey and she can't afford it. Joe offers to pay for the shirt if she agrees to go to dinner with him, but Yan refuses. She says she knows a place with better clothes than this. Before they leave, she fixes his shirt with a pin. Meanwhile, Joe keeps sending Yan messages asking her to meet him, but she doesn't respond. He becomes worried about her. Yan takes Joe to their local Friday market, where she finds a beautiful couple's t-shirt and suggests that he try it on. Joe refuses to buy the couple's t-shirt, saying he won't lower himself to wear something like that. However, Yan is clever and persuades him. He tries the t-shirt on and it looks good on him. Yan asks about the price, and like any woman, she tries to bargain. She tells the saleswoman she'll promote the t-shirts in exchange for 2 free shirts. The saleswoman agrees, and Yen takes 2 shirts for free. She even wears one herself and starts calling out to passers-by, advertising the shirts. People gather around, but they need a little convincing. Yen asks Joe to do his charm and make a special offer for the t-shirt. Naturally, people are impressed by Joe, and they start buying the t-shirts. Meanwhile, Joby, who's been spending his time calculating, is still in the library waiting for a response from Yen. She doesn't reply. He continues calculating how long they will be apart if they break up, and return to Yan, who is teasing Joe about getting the t-shirt for free. She likes to challenge herself and jokes that her life motto is free stuff. She then eats liver from a dirty street vendor, but Joe, who's not used to street food, hesitates. Yan jokes that he should pay for the disgusting food she's eating. Joe comments that Yan is strange, and all her actions seem odd. Yan starts to feel worried because she senses Joe is beginning to suspect something is off. She quickly explains that she loves fashion, which is why she's so into it. However, Joe tells her that her behavior isn't normal, and he's beginning to suspect that there's more to the story. Yan tries to change the subject and finds a free photo booth. She drags Joe along, showing him a different side of life. He experiences the life of the less privileged for the first time. She takes her photo for free and then makes him pay for the rest. Joe ends up enjoying the time he spends with Yen, and at the end of the day, she gives him the photos they took together. She tells him that he looks much better in the t-shirt. Joe warns her not to tell anyone about what happened that day. Yan reassures him, saying she won't tell anyone, calling him arrogant. Afterward, she asks if he can take her home, but she ends up taking the bus. As she's looking at the photos on her way back to the dorm, she drops her phone and someone is waiting for her outside the dorm. It's Joe, who's worried about her. She tells him her battery died, so she didn't see his messages. She says she needs to rest and goes inside, leaving him standing outside. Joe feels sad seeing her happy with Joe in the photo. He starts to think that it's Joe who she truly likes. Meanwhile, back at Yen's dorm, she's washing clothes and looking at the t-shirt. She gets an idea for a new design and starts sketching it. Joe, back at his dorm, is still calculating the probabilities of their breakup and wondering if Yan likes Joe. He bumps into a friend who asks him what's wrong. Joe admits that only a girl could make him feel this way and is advised to confess his feelings as soon as possible. The next morning, Joe decides to buy Yan a gift and waits for her in front of the dorm. When she comes out, he gives her the gift and leaves. Yan opens it and finds a note inside, written in a language she doesn't understand. It's a confession of love, but she can't decipher it. She sends him a similar encouraging message in return. Yan meets with her friend at the university, and they run into Motsi, who continues to flirt with her. Yan ignores him, but he persists and introduces himself, asking her name. Yan doesn't respond, but tells him she knows who he is and is aware of his tricks. Later, Yan meets with Motsi, who asks about her friend. He tells her that since they are friends, Yan will be her friend too. Yan quickly responds that they are not friends and warns him to stay away from her friend, or he will regret it. Yan then sits down with Lu and shows her her new designs. Lu is impressed and says that Yan has improved a lot. However, she notices that Yan looks extremely tired due to her studies. Lu advises her to tell the truth and lighten her load, but Yan is afraid that her sister will lose her scholarship because of the coma she's in. Yan says that Lu must endure it until the end to fulfill her sister's dream. Yan also warns her to stay away from Motsi, calling him a womanizer, but Lu reassures her, saying she knows Motsi well and doesn't have to worry. On her way to class, Yan is stopped by Joe, who insists that they rehearse what she will say at the dinner. She refuses, but Joe threatens her by saying that if she doesn't keep her promise, he'll increase the interest on her debt. Yan tells him what he's doing is wrong and amounts to stealing, but Joe doesn't care. He just wants her to come with him. Yan stands firm, refusing to get into more trouble, and walks off to her class, determined not to go. Joe, back home, is confused about how to convince her, but then he gets an idea. He writes a complaint letter to the post office in Yan's name, but takes a picture of it and sends it to her. He also sends her a message saying that if she doesn't show up within half an hour, she'll have to deal with the consequences. Joe feels satisfied after executing his plan. Soon enough, Yan shows up, visibly angry. She demands to know what the message was about. Joe explains that it's the only way to make her agree to his request. Yan retorts that she has no time for this, and the window for filing complaints has passed. But Joe tells her that he can file a complaint at any time and threatens to send it. Yan warns him to wait, and they'll figure it out. She calls him exploitative, taking advantage of her weaknesses. However, she agrees to be his girlfriend on the condition that no one at the university knows about it. Joe reassures her, saying he doesn't want anyone to know before she does. He gives her a contract he wrote, which outlines the terms of their agreement. Yin reads it, and the first clause is in Joe's favor. Neither of them can reveal their arrangement to anyone. The second clause stipulates that Yin cannot speak to any of Joe's relatives without him being present. The third clause prohibits Yan from talking to Joe at the university or causing him any trouble. The fourth clause is that if Joe calls for her at any time, she must go to him. The last clause is that the agreement is for 1 year, during which Yan must pretend to be Joe's girlfriend. In exchange, he will relieve her of her debt. Although Yan doesn't agree with all the conditions, when she realizes she won't have to pay off her debt, she happily signs it. However, she signs it under her sister's name, not her own. Later, she sits with Lou and complains about Joe's actions, but she admits that she's starting to like him, going on and on about how wonderful he is and how he's the best guy ever. Lou warns Yeon that she's been talking about Joe for the last half hour. She also cautions her about Joe's aunt, suggesting that she will become her mother-in-law and will try to control her. Yen responds that his aunt is a nice lady, and despite being rich, she is humble. She remembers how happy she was to meet her at the party. Lou, however, says that it's all an act and Yen will soon learn the truth. They come from a different social class, and people like that don't just accept anyone easily. Suddenly, Yen receives a call from Joe's aunt, who wants to meet with her right away. Lou reminds her that this is the first sign of control, but Yan is too busy to respond. She tries calling Joe, but he's in a deep sleep. She sends him many messages, hoping he'll save her from his aunt's grasp. Yan arrives at the square, where Joe's cousin Hina is waiting. Hina thinks that Yan should finally get to the bottom of things, since last time she drank too much and couldn't get any information. They start talking about astrology, and Yan finds herself confused when Hina asks how she and Joe met for the first time. Yen fumbles and manages to dodge the question. Meanwhile, Joe is waking up and checks his messages, realizing that Yen needs him. He quickly rushes to find her. Yen and Hina are talking when suddenly, a man in a hurry almost hits them with his vehicle. Fortunately, they manage to dodge it, but the man's painting behind them is ruined. Hina offers to buy the painting to make up for it, but the artist refuses, saying his art is not for sale. Yen tries to fix the damage on the painting, and Joe, who arrives just in time, watches in awe as she does so. The artist is impressed by Yen's skill and thanks her, saying the painting truly needed her touch. Yen explains that painting is just a hobby for her. Hina then asks if Yen could teach her how to paint when she has the time. Joe finally calls out to them, asking about his aunt, and Yen excuses herself to speak with her. Before leaving, Hina mischievously pushes them closer together. However, Yen's hands are covered in paint, and she accidentally stains Joe's shirt. He complains, asking if she's intentionally trying to make him look bad. Hina apologizes and explains it was an accident, blaming it on Yan, who is busy fixing it by painting a heart on Joe's shirt. Joe is impressed by her talent and tells her she seems to have many hidden skills. Yan smiles, feeling proud of herself, and jokingly tells him that she's a treasure. They later go to lunch with Joe's aunt, who praises Yen's beauty, manners, and character. Joe, annoyed, is about to say something but holds back. Yen, seeing an opportunity, teases him, enjoying making him uncomfortable. They both continue to tease each other, much to Joe's aunt's delight. But suddenly, Joe's aunt asks if they plan to get married, making Yen feel uneasy, as the situation seems to be taking a serious turn. Joe quickly deflects by saying, "Not yet," easing the tension. Later, Yen returns to her dorm, talking to herself, realizing that she's caught up in a silly game with Joe. As soon as she sees him, she thinks to herself that she'll find a way out of this. But for now, she feels trapped. Joe comes to confess his feelings, but Yen stops him, telling him not to continue. Joe asks if she doesn't love him, and Yen, though lying, says he's rushing things, and that they both need to wait a little longer before their love can truly blossom. Yen enters the dorm, leaving Joe behind, but he keeps thinking about the change in her behavior. He realizes that she is not Han, as her actions are completely different from what he remembers of Han. Meanwhile, at Joe's house, Metzi points out that Joe hasn't been himself lately and seems to have fallen for Yen. Joe denies it, saying it's not true. Metzi teases him, trying to get him to admit his feelings. He even says he might confess to Yen himself, which makes Joe angry. Finally, Joe admits to Metzi that he does, in fact, love her. The next day at university, Joe tries to talk to Yen during a lecture, but she ignores him. After class, he follows her to tell her that they are going to his mother's house the next day. Yen tells him she's too busy and walks away. Then Shia approaches Joe and asks to go out with him, but he refuses. The following day is Joe's birthday, and he takes Yen to an amusement park to celebrate. Yen asks why they are here, and Joe replies that it's her favorite place. She agrees, but when he asks what ride she wants to play, she points to one, only for Joe to suggest a different ride she actually likes. Yen is confused, as none of these details are in her sister's notes. She follows Joe's suggestion, but secretly she's afraid of high places and doesn't know how to act around him. She's worried that he'll figure out she's not Han. She asks Joe to go get her some water while she calls Lou, but Lou is busy with Metzi, who has been pursuing her. Metzi confesses his feelings for Lou, but she tells him she can't stand him. He insists he'll keep pursuing her until she loves him. Yan tries calling Joe, hoping he can help, but he's busy with practice and doesn't hear his phone. When he finishes, he calls her back. Yan tells him she needs his help, and soon after, Joe arrives. She pretends to be on the phone with the student union president and lies that she's needed back at the university immediately. Joe, though, believes her lie, but her phone dies, which worries him. He decides to search for her. Yan apologizes to Joe, telling him she has to leave, but promises to make it up to him. Joe insists she drinks the water first, and then checks her legs to confirm his suspicion. He confronts her, revealing that she's not Han. He points out that Han remembers his birthday, which isn't today, and doesn't like those rides. He also notices a scar on her leg, shaped like a crescent moon, which Han doesn't have. Joe asks her who she really is and why she's pretending to be Han. Yan stands still in shock, unable to respond. Later, Yan takes him to the hospital where Han is staying, and Joe visits her, feeling sad for his true love. The scene shifts to a flashback of that fateful day when Han had come to tell Yan that she finally got the scholarship. It was a great opportunity for her, one that couldn't be missed. Han had told Yan that she was thrilled about the scholarship because it would change her life forever. But while crossing the street, a car hit her, and the driver didn't notice. The phone call was abruptly cut off, and Yin was shocked as she ran to the spot where Han had been before the accident. She was horrified to find Han severely injured, bleeding. Yan snaps back to the present and tells Joe that when they arrived at the hospital, Han's condition was critical. The doctors managed to save her, but she went into a coma due to a brain injury. There was no choice but for Yan to take her sister's place academically, even though it was difficult and exhausting for her. Worse still, it was dangerous because anyone could discover her secret. Yan apologizes for deceiving Joe, but he reassures her that she was only helping Han, and for that, he forgives her. He sits down, saddened by the situation, as their first time together was when she was unconscious. He also regrets taking too long to confess his feelings to her. Joe apologizes to Yan, admitting he didn't know what she had been going through. He promises to stay by her side until she wakes up and to confess his love then. Yan leaves to visit Han while Joe remains at the hospital reflecting on what's happened. Meanwhile, Mechi continues to pursue Lu, teasing her about not having anyone else to chase. He says he's only waiting for her to give in, but then Joe calls him and asks him to come. Back at the hospital, Yan hears from the nurse that there is a treatment for her sister's condition, which gives her hope. However, she's shocked by the high cost. Despite this, she tells the nurse she will do everything she can to raise the money, and Joe overhears their conversation. Mechi, having followed Joe to the hospital, comments that Joe seems worried about Yan, suggesting he must love her. Joe denies it, but admits he was concerned when he heard her voice on the phone sounding nervous before the call ended. Just then, Mechi spots Yan leaving with Joe and gets angry, wanting to confront them. However, Mechi stops him. He feels even more jealous when he sees Yan holding Joe's hand. Yan, in a conversation with Joe, mentions that Joe is arrogant and self-centered, but she acknowledges that he's been kind to her. Joe hears her words, and despite being hurt, he walks away. Later, when he's alone, Yan thanks him for his help and for standing by her side. She expresses her gratitude, though there's still tension between them. At Joe's house, Mechi teases Joe again, making him even more jealous by suggesting that Yan didn't love him, which is why she went to Joe. He gives Joe advice on how to deal with girls, but Joe, frustrated, gets into an argument with him before going to bed. Back at the dorm, Yan receives a message informing her that someone sent money. She calls Lu to thank her for the help. Lu explains that she sent the money to help with Han's treatment and insists that Yan deserves it. Lu tells Yan to rest a little since exams are coming. The next day, they have an outdoor lecture at the university, and the professor divides them into 3 groups. Yan tries to talk to Joe, but he completely ignores her. She asks him if he's upset, but he doesn't respond. When she tries to start a conversation, he repeats the same things she had said about him at the hospital. They go to collect some samples together, and while they are working, a bee stings Yan, causing her to stumble. Joe quickly pulls her toward him to stop her from falling, and the accidental touch is witnessed by everyone at the university. Yan, embarrassed, runs away, leaving him behind. As she walks through the campus, everyone starts whispering about her. The picture of Yan with Joe spreads on the internet, and everyone starts talking about it. Joe is happy about it and likes the picture, but Mechi, the troublemaker, shows him a comment suggesting that the photo was staged. Another comment mentions that the situation was just an accident and that Yan actually has a boyfriend, but it's not Joe. Joe feels hurt by these comments about his love interest and walks away from Mechi. Yan, meanwhile, encounters the head of Joe's fan club, Sol, who has been waiting for her outside the dorm. Yan tries to avoid her, but Sol confronts her, saying, "I warned you not to get close to Joe, but you didn't listen, so you'll have to deal with the consequences." Yan laughs it off and tells Sol that they misunderstood the situation. She shows Sol a picture of them together and mentions the comment stating that Yen has another boyfriend. Sol, upset, decides to go find Joe. At that moment, Joe is with his crush, and we learn that she is the one who spread the rumor about Yan having another boyfriend. Joe gets upset with her and heads to the basketball court, where Yan is cheering for Joe. He watches from a distance and feels annoyed as his focus is completely on Yen, who's cheering for Joe. Joe feels irritated by her behavior, and even his sister Hana pulls Yen aside to ask what she's doing. Yen, lost in the excitement, forgets that Hana doesn't know about her agreement with Joe. Hana decides to confront Joe in the middle of the match. Accusing him of lying and revealing the agreement between him and Yan, she tells him there's no need for him to challenge Joe for Yan's sake, as the whole thing was just a lie, and he took it too far. Joe warns Hana not to tell his aunt anything about what she knows, but he listens to her, ends the match, and admits he's not a good competitor. He then goes to find Yen in the library and tells her she's tiring him out. She asks what happened, and Joe asks her why she told Hana about their agreement. Yan explains that she felt compelled to tell her the truth, and promised not to tell his aunt. Joe tells her that the contract between them prevented her from sharing any details with anyone. Yen retorts that Clause 4 in the contract forbids him from talking to her at the university, and he doesn't have the right to keep approaching her. She says it's better to keep a distance between them. Just then, Joe's crush, Xian, appears and warns Yen not to get too full of herself. Yen doesn't quite understand what she means, but Xian goes to Joe and tells him that everything he wanted has happened, and she cleared up the rumors about him and Yen. Yen stands nearby, overhearing their conversation, and is not happy about it. She continues her days, working multiple jobs while trying to ignore Joe, who is always around, noticing that she is constantly busy. He starts to suspect she's spending time with Gio. One day, during a lecture, Yan falls asleep from exhaustion. Joe warns her to focus as he notices how tired and worn out she is. Yan, however, is focused on calculating how much money she needs to pay for Han's treatment. Despite working multiple jobs, she still needs more money and tells herself she must find another job. Meanwhile, she is at the university to meet Joe, who requested to see her. However, Metzi appears and delays her. Then Joe runs into Lo, who asks her if she knew Han before, unaware that Yan is not Han. Yan tells him she met Han once before, and Joe asks if she knows anything about her since she has been very tired and busy lately. Yan decides to tell him about her sister's condition, but without revealing her true identity. She tells him that Yan is collecting money to cover her sister's treatment, and since the amount is very high, she decided to take on multiple jobs. Yan also mentions that she knew Joe was rich and might be able to help her, advising him to ask her directly about her problems. Yan walks away, leaving Joe with Mechi, who jokes and says, "Don't take it personally, it was just jealousy." After university, Joe waits for Yan by the trees. As soon as he sees her, he pulls her behind the trees and she asks, startled, "What do you want?" Without wasting any time, he asks, "Do you want to come live with me at my house?" She tells him to stay where he is and asks what he thinks of her. "Do you think I'm like that?" she says. But he responds that his thoughts are on her, and it's her mind that is wandering. He then proposes that she work for him as a housekeeper to earn money, which could also help her pay for her sister's treatment. She refuses, but Joe insists, offering a good salary. She still refuses. So Joe tries one last time, saying he would give her 3 months' salary up front. She reluctantly agrees and takes the contract to review it. She points out that his contracts always have hidden clauses, to which he responds that the contract with her is fine and he won't accept a refusal. Yan agrees to work for him, as it's a good opportunity to earn the money needed for her sister's treatment. She grabs her bag and heads to Joe's house. However, before entering, she remembers the advice her friend gave her, including the pepper spray for self-defense in case Joe tries anything. Yan fears that Joe will find out the truth, that she is not Han, and decides to turn back. But Joe spots her and opens the door, telling her to come in and stop overthinking. Yan enters Joe's house and is amazed by how clean and organized it is. Joe hands her a list of tasks she needs to do and informs her of his strict schedule for sleeping, waking, and eating. He also mentions that he likes a lot of salt in his food and goes on to list a number of other things. Afterward, he tells her she can handle the rest on her own, because they're not as important. Yan, however, thinks to herself that some of the things he said seem quite different, and she grows tired of his arrogance, which she believes will make his ego inflate even more. Later, Joe heads to his room to sleep, and Yan goes to her room to organize her things. She reflects that Joe is very tidy and has a different personality than what he shows. After finishing, she exits her room, looking for something to do, but the entire house shines and she wonders what she could possibly clean. She decides to cut a couple of pieces of fruit and offer them to Joe. He accepts and sits down to eat them. Meanwhile, Yan collects laundry but has trouble reaching the clothesline. Jo lowers the rope to her level using technology. As Yan continues her chores, she decides to take a shower, but Jo hears her screaming from his room. She's shouting because the water temperature keeps changing. Jo rushes in to help, turning off the shower and returning to his room. A little while later, Mechi calls Jo and asks how things are going with Yan. Jo responds that nothing is happening, as they're both in their rooms. Mechi suggests that Jo should get closer to Yan and win her love before Gio does. Jo asks him what he should do, and Mechi advises him to play some sports to show off his muscles and maybe impress her. Jo is not convinced though, and ends the call. A short time later, Jo heads out to play sports, following Mechi's advice. He increases the speed on the treadmill, hoping she will notice and come out, but she only does so after he stops working out. When she approaches, she tells him to cover up, clearly teasing him. She asks if there's anything she can do for him, but he tells her he doesn't need anything. She then says, finally, the day is over. Suddenly the lights go out and Jo falls next to her. Their clothes get tangled up and the pepper spray bottle falls on the couch beneath them. Unfortunately, Jo accidentally sprays it in his eyes, and his eyes begin to burn and turn red. Yan rushes to help him, taking him to the bathroom to wash his eyes. She insists that they go to the hospital, but Jo shouts at her, upset that she brought something like this into his house, and he's hurt because she's so scared of him. Yan responds that she's used to taking care of these things, and that it's not her fault since he's the one who sprayed himself. Jo leaves her and retreats to his room, hoping his eyes will feel better by morning. The next day, Yan prepares breakfast to make up for the previous day's incident. She tells herself that she will endure his bad mood no matter what he says. She serves him breakfast and they eat together. Afterward, Jo tells her he has a soccer match and asks her to pack his bag for him. At the university, Jo tries to talk to Yan, but she's following the terms of their contract. When Sol sees them, she asks Jo to come with her to a lecture, but he refuses and drags Yan along with him, saying they're on the same team and there's no need to hide. Sol becomes angry and decides to come up with a plan to get rid of Yan. Jo heads to his soccer match with Machi. There are so many girls waiting for him, each one handing him a towel to wipe his sweat. But Jo pulls out his own towel, only to be surprised when he sees it's the towel Yan gave him. It has a cute kitty design on it, which makes all the girls think that Jo is a soft-hearted person who loves cats. Jo stands there, embarrassed by what just happened, but he quickly grabs his bag and heads to Yan's workplace. He warns her not to mess up his things. She responds by handing him a piece of paper, saying that just like he has his condition, she also has hers in order to continue working with him. Jo, annoyed, says she's ruining the job and being difficult. He gives her the paper and leaves, and Yan thinks to herself that she'll consider it as his approval. Later, Jo is with the girls, telling them about Luo, the one who captured his heart, and suddenly, Luo enters the pool area. Mechi suggests racing her, but as soon as he steps into the pool, he pretends to drown, hoping she'll rescue him. However, Yan soon realizes Mechi is just playing a prank, which makes her angry. She storms off, leaving him. Meanwhile, Yan is preparing food for Jo, but he refuses to speak to her. Instead, he sends her messages, asking her to bring in the boxes outside that the girls sent him as a gift. When she opens the boxes, she finds a bunch of kitty cats and teddy bears. Jo tells her to throw them away, but Yan takes them to her room and prepares lunch for him. She's about to leave to meet Gio at the hospital when Jo overhears her talking and tries to stop her in any way possible. He even claims he loves the food she makes and forces her to clean his shoes because he plans to go out with them. Yan manages to escape by smearing his hands with black ink, and as he goes to wash up, she locks him in the bathroom and leaves to meet Gio. At the hospital, Yan is talking to Han, wishing her a speedy recovery so she can get back to her life. Gio walks in, asking what she's doing. Yan tells him that the doctors said the patient needs to taste the food to stay aware, even if they are unconscious. Gio, noticing her exhaustion, says he understands she's been working hard and that Han's condition is difficult to manage alone, as patients in comas need someone to talk to in order to stay conscious. He asks if Han is showing any improvement, and Yan tells him that her vital signs have improved since they started the new treatment. Gio then asks about her relationship with Jo, mentioning that he's heard many rumors. He warns her that anything related to relationships doesn't go unnoticed, especially since girls will be after her, and her identity might be exposed. Yan assures him she's trying to be careful, but sometimes her job requires her to be around Jo. Back at Jo's house, he's waiting for Yan, seeming to have plans for her. When she arrives, he goes into his room to execute his plan, He pretends to be sick with a high fever and starts coughing so that she'll come in to check on him. She enters his room and asks what's wrong, and Joe says, "You must be blind not to see that it's your fault since you locked me in the bathroom and left me under the shower." She apologizes, telling him she didn't realize he'd be so scared. She thought he was tough. Joe then asks if she can make him some malokia, and she agrees, telling him she'll make it for him. She prepares a plate of malokia with rabbit meat, although she admits it's just a regular dish, but it's still something. After serving it to him, she says, "That'll be 20 pounds. He protests, saying he paid for 3 months in advance, but she insists that this charge is for her own time, as it's her personal time. The next day, Joe wakes up to the smell of food Yan is cooking. He comes out and asks her to prepare breakfast for him. She tells him she made him more malokia, but this time it's on the house. However, she hands him the bill for the previous day and says, "No more freebies, it's all business." She tells him that she's going out for a delivery job, and as she walks out, Joe cleans up behind her. But Yan forgets her helmet, and Joe runs after her to return it. He offers to drive her since she forgot her helmet, but she refuses, saying if she had a car like his, she wouldn't be doing this job in the first place. She tries to escape, but Joe follows her. She attempts to evade him, but he catches up. As she continues running, a police officer stops her for not wearing her helmet. Yan tries to convince the police officer, saying, "Sir," but he doesn't respond. She tries again, saying, "Hey, come on," but still, he doesn't reply. What can she do? She leaves her helmet and wonders what to do. Then Joe shows up and she tells him, "It's your fault this happened. Because of you, I sped up and got a fine." Joe explains, "I was following you to give you the helmet." Yan asks, "If you had the helmet, why didn't you give it to me?" She complains that because of him, her helmet got taken, and as punishment, he has to deliver her orders today. On the way, Joe spills the tea. When they reach the customer, Yan's attempt to save face doesn't work, and things go awry. Joe tries to make up for it by offering to make her a cup of tea at home. Yan finds it even better than the one she bought, but Joe claims homemade tea is better because it's pure, not mixed. Yan leaves feeling good because the customer didn't complain. But her joy doesn't last when she finds out the customer filed a complaint, claiming their tea was mixed. She yells at Joe for ruining her job over a cup of tea. Joe offers to treat her to lunch, but she responds, "Just give me the money, I'm not in the mood for food." They go to a restaurant, and after a while, Joe announces they want a free meal. Yan enters thinking everything is fine, but it turns out Joe had arranged this with the restaurant so that she would eat. The staff, suspecting they won't pay, starts to question them, and Yan realizes Joe's plan. Joe, noticing her discomfort, tells her to pay with his card. Yan is embarrassed but decides to leave the food and walks out. Joe is left in a bad mood because of her actions. Back at home, Joe reminds Yan not to forget the laundry. She asks for a break, but he insists, saying he's going out and that she needs to follow his instructions. He goes to meet Matsi, who needs help picking out a cake. Matsi advises him to get one for Yen, but Joe refuses. Matsi suggests Joe wait until he loses Yen, and then someone else will take her. Matsi leaves, and Joe buys a cake that lights up. Yes, it actually lights up. He also sees his fan club, who are buying his t-shirts, and decides to wear one. When he gets home, he puts the cake in the fridge. Joe, still with his head high, calls for Yan to make him dinner. She responds that he should understand and not ask for anything today because he's the reason she lost her job. Still, Joe asks for cold water, hoping Yan will open the fridge and see the cake. However, she gets a call from a customer about money matters, and she leaves Joe, telling him to make his own dinner while she goes to make up for her losses. Meanwhile, Matsi visits Luo to give her the cake. Luo accidentally drops it, but Matsi falls to the ground and Yan helps him. Later, Yan returns the money to Joe, who is still upset and waiting. He asks for dinner again, and finally, she opens the fridge and sees the glowing cake. She's thrilled and almost devours it, but Joe explains that it was a gift from the store. He had been getting one for Matsi, but he ended up taking the second one as a gift for her. He suggests she keep it, and they can eat it together. Ian then gets a candle and lights it. Joe asks, "Why the candle?" Ian replies that it's been more than 2 years since her birthday was spent at work, and this is the first cake she's seen in that time. She decided to celebrate today since it's a rare occasion. Joe wishes her to always stay happy, but Yan silently wishes that Han will wake up and return to her life so that she too can find peace and return to her old life. She's exhausted from her current situation, but Joe surprises her with the announcement of the upcoming Union Cup date. Yan is shocked because now things are getting serious. Joe tells her that she needs to focus in the upcoming period to win the cup, as their college wins it every year, and it's essential for their team to keep the tradition. Joe offers to help her prepare for it by reviewing her work, giving her piles of books to study, which frustrates Yan as she's unsure where to even start. Joe offers his assistance, promising to help if she needs it. The next day at college, everyone is wearing Joe's t-shirt. It seems the sales for the t-shirt have gone up, and the designer contacted Yan to thank her. Yan notices everyone dressed alike and asks one of the girls about it. She explains it's Joe's new style, and it seems like Yan got an idea to make some money off of it. Meanwhile, Joe is surprised to see everyone wearing the same shirt, but he's even more shocked when he finds Yen studying with Gio. He pulls her aside to scold her for getting 5 questions wrong out of 8, and tells her she can't win the competition with results like that. From now on, she'll have to take a break from work and he'll compensate her. If she wins the competition, she'll get a reward. Joe begins tutoring Yan at home, and he keeps pushing her until she finishes the exam. However, she gets so tired that she falls asleep. Joe carries her to bed. The next day, Yan wakes up and is surprised to find herself in bed, not remembering how she got there. After breakfast, she asks Joe for his measurements because she wants to make him a gift. He asks if she knows how to design, and she gets nervous, fearing he might find out. She tells him she can design, but her friend will do the sewing for her. She goes to the cafe they usually hang out at and gives her friend Joe's measurement, asking her to adjust the designs to Joe's sizes because she wants to thank him for helping her study. Her friend asks if she's planning to participate in the competition, but Yan says the deadline to withdraw has passed. However, she could still change the contestant. Yin starts thinking about how to change the player without embarrassing herself. She considers pretending to be sick, but Joe won't let her. Unfortunately, while she's lost in thought, she almost bumps into an elderly woman, but manages to avoid her, only to fall and injure herself. It's a small scratch, but it's just enough to help her get out of the competition. She wraps her hand with bandages and hopes Joe will help her, but he only mocks her instead of properly treating the injury. Eventually, he helps her with the bandage, but it takes a while, and by that point, he gets worried since she isn't answering her phone. He calls his sister Hana, who tells him that Yan hasn't returned to her dorm. She asks if he's worried about her, and he hangs up. Then, Yan sends him a message saying she's sick and will return today. The next day, Yan arrives at the college with her hand bandaged, and when her classmate Shia sees her, she says they might lose the Union Cup because of her injury. When the lecturer enters, Yan explains what happened and that she won't be able to participate in the competition. However, the lecturer tells her that her health is more important than any competition. Shia and her friend argue that there's no time to replace her and that the college will lose the Union Cup, which is an honor for Charlotte College. Joe steps in and says that he will take her place. Yen thanks him for taking over her spot, but he scolds her, calling her careless for not taking care of herself, but always looking out for others. At home, Yan tries to give Joe a thank you gift, but he steps out of his room and asks her what she wants. She says she was just making sure if he needed anything, but Joe tells her it would be better if she stayed quiet and stopped nagging. Then he notices the t-shirt she's holding and asks what it is. She says it's a gift to thank him, and he takes it from her. Yan goes to make him coffee, but then Dodo reminds her to hang the laundry. She's scared that Joe will find out that she's lying about her injury, so she removes the bandage. When she hears Joe coming, she quickly puts it back on. Joe asks how she's hanging the laundry with one hand, and she tells him the most important thing is determination. He teases her, saying they should make a statue of her, but she refuses, asking him for money instead. He takes the laundry and hangs it while she prepares the coffee. He tells her he only drinks Americano and asks her to go to bed because he can't focus with her around. The next morning, Yan wakes up without realizing she's still bandaged, but catches herself before Joe sees. Joe, having left early, leaves breakfast on the table. Yan takes it to the college, where Joe is studying in the library. When she arrives, Shia is with him, so Yan quickly leaves before anyone notices her. She stays hidden, watching them together. But then she insults Joe, unaware that he can hear her since he's in the library. She feels embarrassed when he calls her out for speaking loudly in the library and walks off, muttering that it was a waste of breakfast. Joe, standing on the other side, hears her and asks about the breakfast she made for him. She lies, saying she didn't bring it, but he takes the box she's hiding behind her back. Later that night, Joe is playing PUBG, and Yan asks if he wants anything. He tells her no since the exam is tomorrow, and nothing else matters right now. He gives her some ointment for her injury. Before Yan goes to bed, she tells Joe that she's worried about the competition because if they lose, it will be her fault, and the rest of the students will blame her. Joe reassures her that he will do his best to win and make her proud. Yin thanks him for always being there for her and helping her. As a gesture of encouragement, she gives him a gift to cheer him on for the competition. Yen sits at her college and watches the competition, which is being broadcast live. The whole university is watching, and everyone is cheering for Joe because he was the champion last year. The competition begins, and the challenge is tough, but Joe manages to win the title again. The entire university celebrates his victory. Yan thinks to herself that she met an amazing guy, someone who's getting better every day. But she feels like a liar, and every day she feels worse. She wonders what he will do when he finds out the truth. That night, Joe's fan club decides to throw a celebration for his victory, and we learn that Xia invited Yan to make her feel uncomfortable. Sali arrives first and forces Yan to drink. Yayan drinks to avoid suspicion, and then the other two join and get her to drink even more. But Joe arrives just in time to stop her from getting too drunk, telling them they're students and should slow down on the drinking. He takes Yan home, but she pretends to be unconscious so that Joe doesn't try to talk to her. However, her necklace falls, and she sees a picture of her and Joe together, which makes her nervous. Yan wonders if what she saw was real. How could someone like Joe ever notice her? The next morning, Joe decides to wake her up, but isn't sure if she's truly awake. He tells himself he'll wait until she wakes up to figure out if she saw him. He goes to make breakfast for her before she wakes up. When Yen finally wakes up, she sees Joe standing in the kitchen. She's unsure whether to confront him or pretend she didn't see anything. She goes into her room to get ready, hoping that maybe Joe will like her and confess his feeling. Yen joins Joe for breakfast, and they both wait for the other to speak. Joe wonders if she saw him, and Yen wonders if it was all a dream. Joe decides to test her and asks, "You said yesterday that you'd work for me for free this month. My motto in life is free, but it's not on me." He tells her not to be startled and adds that he didn't take her words seriously. From this, he realizes she's being herself again. They finish breakfast in silence, with neither of them saying anything meaningful to the other. Joe goes to the university and for the second time finds everyone wearing the same t-shirt. He's upset because he thought the design was meant for him alone. Yan is with Lo, preparing more t-shirts for sale. Lo tells Yen that she has confirmed she's materialistic, and Yen opens up about what happened with Joe the previous night, but says he didn't say anything, so maybe it was just a dream. Lo reminds Yen that it's not her, but Hana, who Joe likes. She warns her that someone like Joe is dangerous because he has so many admirers, and if Yeon continues to act like this, it will hurt her reputation. Meanwhile, Joe is sitting selling t-shirts and is happy about how well they're selling, but then he sees a comment from a girl insulting Yen, so he engages in an argument with her. Sally intervenes and tells him that if she knew him better, she wouldn't leave him alone. Joe is taken aback by how much the girls defend him. Later he returns home and sees the t-shirt trending online, but suddenly, a bee attacks him and it stings him badly. Yayan is still with Lo, continuing to work on the orders. Lo asks her if she's staying at Joe's house or going back home, and Yayan says she hasn't decided yet. Lo tells her that it's clear she likes Joe. As usual, when Yayan brings up a topic, Joe calls her, and she answers. Joe asks her to come help him with something. When she arrives, she struggles to open the door, but Joe shouts for her to hurry. She pulls out her insect repellent and tells Joe she'll call the police, but Joe yells at her, saying it's just a bee. Yan teases him, asking if he's really scared of a bee. She comes up with a plan to catch the bee, and they successfully capture it. Yan jokes, asking what Joe wants her to do with it. Joe takes the bee from her and throws it out the window, then confronts her, asking why she's avoiding him. She tries to leave, but he says they haven't finished yet. He asks about the t-shirt, and Yen admits that she distributed it to everyone, apologizing. She tells him Lo was the one who used the design, and Yen runs off to escape her. Yen calls Lo and tells her to slow down with the production since Joe realized everyone's wearing the t-shirt. Lo asks how he found out, and Yen says everyone is wearing it. Lo finally tells Yen to just admit that she's the one responsible. Yen then comes up with a plan for Joe to believe that Lo is the one behind it all. She goes to Joe and starts selling the design in her name, holding a competition where the winner will meet her in person and have their wish granted. She gets a large order from Motzi and delivers it to him, saying he won. He asks her about the wish she promised, teases him, saying he's not the winner. She walks away, leaving him confused. Motzi, seeing the girls flocking around the t-shirts, gives them away as gifts since there's a large quantity. However, Joe arrives and gets upset when he sees them, as even the things he loves are now worn by everyone, leaving no sense of uniqueness in his life. He also blames Motzi for helping them out, so he takes the t-shirts back from the girls. Meanwhile, Sally is on her way to Joe's house to give him a gift, but she's surprised to find Yen entering his house. She takes a photo of her and leaves. At the university, she informs Xia about what she saw, telling her that Yan is pretending to be uninterested in Joe, even though she clearly has feelings for him. Later, Sally confronts Yan, accusing her of trying to steal Joe from Shia. Yan denies it, but Sally shows her the video she took and threatens to expose her relationship with Joe if she doesn't stay away from him. The confrontation escalates, and during the argument, Sally accidentally drops a flower pot from the dorm. The teacher calls them out, reprimanding Sally for only caring about the fan club and neglecting her studies. Yan also feels disappointed in Sally, who she once thought was a distinguished student. The teacher scolds Yan, saying her behavior is not what a cultural exchange student should have and that she's just seeking fame like everyone else. Yan is terrified because this could cost her scholarship, and she promises the teacher she'll change. Yan goes to visit her sister in the hospital, explaining her plan to leave Joe's house. She had always known the outcome, but now she was ready to leave it all behind. At Joe's house, she prepares dinner, but Joe is upset about the t-shirts and keeps criticizing everything she does. He reminds her that she's the one working for him, not the other way around. Yan gets angry and tells him that she's done and will leave because she can't please him, and he forces her to do things she doesn't want to. She grabs her bag and leaves. Joe doesn't try to stop her, but it starts raining heavily, and she forgot her umbrella. Joe runs after her, catching up to her, but he can't find her because she's hiding under a tree, crying while holding a picture of them together. He mistakes another girl who looks like her for Yan and follows her. But when he reaches her, it's not Yan. He sees her getting into a taxi, but is unable to stop her. Yan returns to the dorm and encounters Sally, who yells at her for coming back after what happened earlier. Sally has taken Yan's belongings, but Yan demands she remove them. Sally refuses, so Yan throws her things out. Sally is surprised at Yan's sudden boldness since she's always been shy. The next day, Joe wakes up at home, upset because Yan isn't there. Meanwhile, Yan wakes up, still in disbelief that she moved back into the dorm. She heads to her college and meets Joe, who asks if it's true that the teacher yelled at her. She confirms it and tells him that it's better for them not to talk for a while, as her situation has drawn attention because of him, and it could expose her lie. She receives a message from Joe, transferring money to her, but Yan refuses to accept it. Joe arrives at the university and meets Motzi, who tries to make up with him over the t-shirt issue. But Joe doesn't want to talk and walks away. Motzi follows him and asks if he's fighting with Yan. Joe admits that Yan left his house, but said things about him before leaving. Motzi tells him that someone must have found out they were living together, and that's why Yan is scared and chose to distance herself. Joe agrees with Motzi, saying he was right. Motzi suggests that Joe be direct and confess his feelings to Yan so no one else can get close to her. Joe gets annoyed, but Motzi insists that if he doesn't confess, someone else will take Yan from him. Meanwhile, Yan receives a message from Joe asking her to meet him at the university gate. Motzi, however, sent the message on Joe's behalf to make sure she doesn't come. Yan, pretending to be busy, says she can't meet him. Motzi tells Joe that Yan won't be coming and suggests that Joe follow Motzi's plan. Go get a bouquet of flowers and take Yan away in front of everyone to show everyone his feelings for her. Joe refuses Motzi's idea, thinking it's foolish. Instead, he decides to go to Yan's workplace, where she's distributing advertisement. He arranged for people to get paid if they took the advertisement. Yan doesn't know who arranged it, but when she sees Joe handing out money to people, she realizes he was behind it. She tries to leave, but Joe follows her, grabbing her and taking her to his car, insisting that if she won't come willingly, she'll come by force. Joe takes her to the university to confess his love for her, presenting her with a beautiful bouquet of flowers. He tells her that he's willing to change and that if there's anything she doesn't like about him, she can tell him and he will adjust. But he asks her to stay with him because he loves her. Before she can respond, she receives a phone call from the hospital informing her that there is a sign of improvement with her sister Han. Yan is overjoyed and tells them she's coming immediately. She apologizes to Joe for needing to leave, but he insists on hearing her response first. She tells him that she can't be with him and walks away. However, she soon sees fireworks which Joe had prepared for her, and she realizes how much he loves her, but she knows she's not the same girl he loves, and she can't live a lie. Later, Motzi arrives and asks Joe what happened. Joe explains that Yan rejected his love. Meanwhile, Yan arrives at the hospital, and the doctor informs her and her sister Gio that Han has moved her arms, signaling that the treatment is starting to work. There's a chance Han could wake up soon and return to her life. The next day at the university, Joe and Yan cross paths but ignore each other, acting as if the other isn't there. There's a match between Gio's team and Yan's team. The game begins, and at first, both teams focus on their opponents until Yan and Joe end up on the same side. However, Joe takes a hit instead of Yan. In the end, Yan's team wins the game, but she hurts her leg. The girls gather around her, accusing her of pretending to get injured just to attract Joe's attention. Joe scolds them, telling them no one else did what Yan did and they shouldn't blame her performance for their own failure. He picks her up, ignoring the gossip, and takes her to the medical room. When they arrive, the nurse isn't there, so Joe decides to tend to her himself. Yan feels embarrassed by his closeness, but Joe can't hold back and confesses his love for her. He tells her he can't hide his feelings anymore. Before she can respond, the doctor enters and asks who the patient is. Yan leaves the clinic and Joe takes her outside. He asks her if she hates him for not accepting his love, but she says someone like him is impossible to hate. She finally admits that she loves him too, but that loving him doesn't mean they should be together. Joe asks her why, and she tells him that he's successful and famous, and she doesn't want to be his shadow. She wants to have her own identity, not always be known as his girlfriend. He doesn't believe her and presses her about the real reason. She finally admits that it's because she's not Han, and she's afraid he'll find out and leave her. Yan rejects his love again, and this time Joe walks away, not planning to fight for her anymore. Yan arrives at her sister's room, where she finds her crying and tells her everything that happened. Her friend advises her that Joe seems like the right person for her, but Yan worries about her sister's future and feels she must sacrifice her love for her sake. Meanwhile, Joe is with Motzi, who tells him Yan rejected him again. He suggests that Joe try again, but Joe refuses, feeling his pride has been shattered. Motzi gives him advice on how to approach the situation. Later, Yan calls Joe and asks to meet with him. Motzi meets with Joe and tells him that Yan wants him to help her get closer to Joe. Motzi claims to have a plan that will bring them together, but only if Joe agrees to have lunch with her first. The next day, there's a painting competition at the university, where they have to create a mural about love to welcome visiting students. The only person who can draw in their department is Joe, but he's busy. Yan volunteers, claiming she can draw well. Sally, annoyed by this, plans with Shia to ruin Yan's drawing, but Shia insists that the weather will ruin it anyway. Yan stays up late working on the mural, but suddenly it starts to rain, and the paint begins to wash away. Yan tries to salvage it, but she falls and loses consciousness. Joe arrives just in time to catch her before she hits the ground. She wakes up in the hospital with Gio by her side, asking what happened. The doctor tells Yan that she fainted from exhaustion, and Joe brought her here. She asks if Joe just left her with him like that. The doctor says she should get up to finish her painting, but Yan realizes that Joe will complete it for her. The next day she goes to the university after Joe drops her off, and her friend tells her to be careful with her leg and suggests she take the day off. But Yan refuses because she wants to finish her task. When she reaches the mural, everyone is complimenting her for the artwork. When she gets closer, she finds that Joe has finished it with some adjustments, adding memories of their time together. She feels happy, and Joe notices this. Before leaving, she thanks him for the help, but he says he did it for the university, not for her. That evening, Yan is studying, and her friend asks about the mural. Yan mentions that Joe finished it perfectly. Her friend tells her that Joe loves her, but Yan avoids the topic. However, her friend convinces her to go out together the next day. The next day, Motzi meets Joe near a gift shop and asks for his help to confess to Yan, but Joe wants to leave. Motzi begs him to assist and asks him to get a big bouquet of flowers. Meanwhile, Yan takes her friend to the flower garden, a place filled with memories of Joe. She asks why she chose this place, and her friend says she knows Yan loves him. Suddenly, Yan hears a confession from Motzi, and she searches for him. Motzi tells her that if she wants to find him, she should follow the location. Yan asks her to wait, and she follows the location, eventually finding Motzi. She asks him why he's doing this because it wasn't part of their plan. They both had worked together to bring Yan and Joe together, but Motzi took the opportunity to confess his love. He then asks her to read his confession message, claiming it will help her complete her mission. Yan follows Motzi but ends up locking him in a room. He apologizes, asking her to let him out, but she throws the key away and goes to look for Joe. Joe arrives with flowers and finds Motzi trying to get out. Yan leaves him to search alone and goes to Joe, who asks about the key. Yan explains that she lost it in the garden and that she might not be able to find it. Joe believes her and goes off to search for Yan. Yan continues looking for the key and then meets Motzi again, who offers her binoculars to help watch Joe and Yan from a distance. She agrees to let him out of the room. Meanwhile, Joe finds Yan, who was calling for him. When he reaches her, he makes sure she's okay and proposes to her one last time. He tells her to take the flowers if she accepts his love, and if she doesn't, she can leave them. At first, she is about to reject him, but a bee flies around the flowers. She takes them from him, knowing he's afraid of bees. Joe believes this is her accepting his love, and he tells her that she is now his, and nothing can separate them. Yen watches the scene, happy that they've reconciled. Motzi tells Yen to try love because she won't regret it. He also says he will change for her if she accepts his feelings. Yen agrees. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Gio is with Han and notices her pulse rising suddenly, and she begins to move her arms. He's worried but is overjoyed when he sees Han's eyes open. Finally, Han wakes up from her coma just as Yan accepts Joe's love. What will happen when Joe learns the truth? Later, Yan wakes up from a nightmare, imagining herself on a white horse with Joe. But when Joe approaches her, he tells her that she isn't Han. She then tells her story again, which we have already heard. She arrives at the university one day, late for her English speech. She meets Joe and they go to the studio to rehearse the speech. She's nervous and can't speak, so she receives a message. She tells Joe she's going to the bathroom, where she meets Han, who has just woken up from her coma. They switch places so Han can deliver the speech. When Joe looks for Yan, he sees Han coming out of the bathroom and asks why she's so shy around him. He's surprised by her change in behavior when she delivers the speech perfectly and changes the subject. He asks why she changed the speech, and she says she forgot the original, so she improvised. He reminds her that she promised to bake cookies for him once she finished. Han seems nervous, and Joe notices. They go to the supermarket to buy ingredients, and Han politely asks him for help. Joe tells her he's not used to her being so polite since Yan wasn't like that. Meanwhile, Han sends a message to Yan, asking her to meet her at the supermarket, where they try to switch places again. Yan manages to take her turn and walks with Joe. She goes to bake the cookies, but she's surprised to find that her sister has bought ingredients unrelated to cookies at all. After a while of waiting, the cookies are finally ready, but Yan is shocked by how they turned out. She tries to hide them from Joe, who is sitting and waiting. She asks him if he wants to change his mind and order delivery instead, but he says he's been waiting for a long time. She says, "Well, don't criticize the cookies." He replies that even if they're bad, he'll eat them because he's hungry. She decides to confess the truth to him. She tells him that she's going to tell Joe the truth and wants it to be in a romantic way. She thinks about creating a romantic atmosphere at his house so she can tell him. She asks her friend what his reaction might be, and her friend says that no matter what his reaction is, she should tell him anyway. So Yian goes to Joe's house and starts creating a romantic vibe. Meanwhile, Joe arrives and is surprised by what she's done. After a while, Joe turns on the lights and asks her directly what she wants. Yan says she has an important secret to tell him, something he must know. They don't realize that Joe's aunt has sneaked out and overheard their conversation. Yan finally enters the room to confess, but the aunt cuts in. Yan tries to explain herself, saying it's her first time coming over, and she even asks Joe to confirm. The aunt, trying to calm things down, gives Yan a wedding dress as a gift, laughing. Joe tells her that she's rushing things, saying they're not even officially together yet. Yan tells Joe that she doesn't really know him well enough yet, and he doesn't know her well either. This upsets Joe, and he asks her what she wants to know about him. Yan is taken aback because it sounds like Joe is asking her to marry him. She quickly excuses herself, saying she forgot about a class, grabs her bag, and runs out, thinking that it looks like they are trying to force her into a marriage. Joe's aunt tells him that she frightened Yan with her words. Joe takes the wedding gift and heads to his room. He starts thinking about what Yan said, about having a secret that she needs to share with him. The next day at class, Joe asks Han to sit next to him, but she chooses to sit behind him instead. He's bothered and sends her a message. At the same time, Yan sends a message to her sister, asking her to sit next to Joe. However, the message is received by Han, not Yan. Han then moves to sit beside Joe, apologizing for not noticing him before. After the lecture, Joe stops her to ask what the secret was that she wanted to tell him. She replies that he will find out later when they meet at night. As they walk out, Motzi steps in to rescue her from the awkward moment, saying that some new books have arrived at the library. Han agrees to go with him, but before she leaves, she asks Joe to not be late for their meeting that night. Han goes to the library and thanks Joe for helping her escape from Joe. However, she gets a small cut on her finger. Joe goes to get a medical adhesive to help her. At that moment, Joe enters the library, sees her, and then returns to apply the adhesive. They have an electric moment of attraction. Joe then tells Han that she needs to quit her job to focus on studying. But Han replies that she now understands how hard her sister works for them, and that's why she decides to keep her job. Meanwhile, Joe is talking to Yan and asking her about the secret. She tells him that she will meet him later that night to tell him. At that moment, Han passes by Joe but doesn't speak to him. It seems like he's figured something out. He looks at his phone and then at her, but maybe he didn't see things clearly. Yan then tells Joe that she has a surprise for him that night, but Joe says, "I have one for you too, darling, but don't be late." What will Yan do when she faces him that night? Keep following the story to find out. Yan informs Lo that she will meet Joe soon and that she will finally tell him everything. Lo reassures her not to be afraid and that she will succeed. Back at university, Han finishes her work with Joe and is about to send a message to Yin, but Joe grabs her phone saying he just wants her to be with him. Joe is eagerly waiting for Yin at his house. She finally arrives and apologizes for being late, but he says nothing and just tells her to go inside. Later, Han comes out of Joe's house. Joe asks her if she thinks his gift is better than hers. Yen can't say anything and just stands there quietly, unable to respond. She is left alone with Joe to explain everything. Joe asks her what her real name is, and she tells him it's Yan. He then asks if she is from their college, and he is shocked when she tells him that she is from a different college. He asks why she lied. Yin explains that her sister had an accident and went into a coma. She would have lost her scholarship if she didn't register, so she had to take her place until her sister woke up. After that, she was planning to leave and disappear from the college. Joe asks if that meant she was planning to leave him too. She says that meeting him was the best accident that ever happened to her, and she had been trying to keep her distance from him to prevent him from knowing the truth. But love won her over, and she fell for him. Joe asks why she hid the truth from him, and she says she wanted to confess from the beginning, but every time she was too scared. Joe asks if she doesn't trust him that much, and she hides behind the painting she has. He pulls her towards him, and she accidentally cuts her finger. Yi-Yan gets worried, but he doesn't let her see the wound. She tells him that no matter what she says, he won't believe her anymore. But if he wants to break up with her, she's fine with it. Joe yells at her to be quiet, and she walks out, leaving him behind. He thinks she's running away from him. After a while, Joe sits and thinks about her words, the secret she has to tell him, and how she rejected the proposal because they didn't know each other well enough. He realizes that she was talking about herself, not him. He picks up the gift she gave him, a t-shirt with traits that she loves about him written on it. Later, she returns, bringing a first aid kit, and he asks her why she came back after running away earlier. She tells him that she wants to treat his injury and then leave immediately. Yin confesses that she was afraid to confront him because she was scared that he might leave her. She tells him she will distance herself from him until he makes a decision. Joe tells Yin that the real mistake wasn't that she lied to him, but that she hid the truth from him until now. He only learned her real name today, and a relationship shouldn't start with lies. He also accuses her of wanting to break up with him, but Yin promises she won't mention breaking up again. She asks if he forgives her, and he says it's impossible. He won't forgive her until he trains her. She gives him the gift she made specifically for him. Joe stands up, doesn't seem interested, and tries to walk away, but he comes back to get it when he sees how upset she is. He goes into his room and finds the t-shirt she gave him with the words, "You are the joy of my youth," written on it. But if you flip the words, it reads, "You are the young man I loved." Meanwhile, Han and Joe are at the university, and Joe apologizes for leaving her. He says he should have taken her back to her dorm himself, or else Joe wouldn't have known the truth. Han tells him that the truth would have come out no matter what, and that Yan will be able to handle Joe. Han notices a poster about an art competition, and remembers when she suggested her sister enter, but Yan refused because the fees were too high, and it would be hard to manage their expenses. But Han saw her sister holding the flyer, clearly interested. Han tells Joe that she intends to take care of her sister the same way Yan used to take care of her. Back at Joe's house, Yan is baking cookies to make up for her mistakes. Why? Because the quickest way to a man's heart is through his stomach. No words needed. Joe comes in and smells the cookies, asking her if they're like the last ones. She replies, "Taste them and let me know what you think." He asks if they can talk and tells her to take note of these rules. First, you cannot lie to me. Second, I should be the first to know if something happens. Third, no talking to any guy the way you talk to me. Fourth, no giving me gifts and then sharing them with everyone. Ian promises to listen to him from now on. In a fan club, news spreads about Joe and Yan's breakup. The fans ask Chia if she knows anything about it. She goes to ask Joe, who confirms it. But this is all part of a plan from Joe and Yan to push girls away from Han, Yan's sister. The girls tell Chia that her chances with Joe are back, and now is the time for her to try again. Joe gets a phone call from Motzi, asking him if Yan is his neighbor. Joe says, "No, of course not, she didn't leave me, we just moved in like normal." However, a group of girls overhears and spreads a rumor in Joe's fan club. Joe meets Motzi, who thinks Yan left him. He realizes that the rumor started because of Motzi's words. Motzi tries to console him, but Joe tells him, I'm fine. Why do you insist on thinking I'm upset? Motzi insists, saying he knows Joe is hiding his feelings, so Joe takes him to have a drink to get him off his back. Meanwhile, Yen is at work distributing advertisements, and Lo is on her way to her job. However, a car pulls up, and one of the men inside kidnaps Yan. Lo sees her and calls Joe to inform him about the kidnapping. Describing the car, Joe tells her to follow them while he handles the situation. It turns out the kidnapper is Motzi, who did it just to give Yen some love advice. Yen recognizes his voice the moment he speaks. Joe calls Motzi and tells him to meet him at the cafe if he wants to see Yen. It seems Motzi actually believed he had kidnapped her for real. Motzi meets Joe at the cafe, and Yen scolds him, saying he's going to get an earful from her. She chases him around, ready to hit him. Afterward, she takes Yen to explain things to Motzi, and when Joe finds out, he says he should have been the first to know. Yen then takes Joe out for a walk to give them some space to talk. Later, they end up at a hotel next to the cafe. You'll understand why soon, as I mentioned that it's connected to the cafe. The reason is that a famous artist is staying at the hotel, and his manager is trying to convince him to be a judge for the competition. However, the artist isn't agreeing to it. Joe manages to dodge Motzi in the cafe, but who else is there? Yan and Joe. Shun, the artist, taps Joe on the shoulder, and by sheer coincidence, they realize they know each other. Joe sees them interacting smoothly and asks if they know each other. Yan responds, saying Shun is the neighbor who used to follow her around when they were kids. Joe jokes about it being an old love, but Yan quickly dismisses it, explaining that they were just kids back then. Shun moved away when they were young. Motzi is at the cafe too, and when Yen leaves to fetch her helmet, Motzi has a ridiculous idea and breaks it. He tries to make excuses to walk her home. When Yen returns, she's upset, but Motzi promises to fix it before her father finds out. Yan reveals that her father passed away a long time ago, and the helmet was the last gift he gave her, so it means a lot to her. Motzi feels guilty and realizes he's messed up. Meanwhile, Shun is with his manager, who is trying to convince him to join the competition since he signed a contract. If he doesn't show up, they will be fined. Shun throws the blame on his manager, saying it's his fault for signing the contract. He tries to convince Shun, handing him the files of the contestant. By coincidence, the first file is Yan's picture, and Shun decides to join the competition just because of Yan. Later, Shun looks at an old painting of Yan he had done a long time ago. He tells himself that he's finally back. What is he planning to do now? Meanwhile, Yan is at university, talking to Han. Han asks what gift she should get for Joe's birthday, which is tomorrow. Shun is behind Yen, preparing to surprise her. Yen tells Han that when Joe thought she was Yen, he gave her a wooden plaque with the words, "Let's walk together" written on it. Han comments on how romantic Joe is, but Yen seems surprised, asking her sister how they're actually a good match. After talking to her sister, Shun approaches Yen, scaring her playfully. She's happy to see him and says she hasn't seen him in ages. She misses the old days with him. He suggests they relive those days, and she agrees. They go out together, and he says she used to chase him to get candy, but she reminds him that he was the one who used to steal it from Han first. She then asks what brought him back. He tells her that he's back to continue his studies, which he had abandoned because of work. Motzi sees them together and takes pictures. He later shows Joe the photos, who gets incredibly jealous. Motzi warns Joe about Shun, saying childhood love can reignite, especially since Shun is attractive and famous. Joe, however, brushes him off, telling him to leave. Later, Joe takes Yen out for a fun time, playing the games she loves, and of course he's the one paying. He asks her what she did today, and she tells him about her day. He asks if she forgot anything, and she mentions meeting Shun. Joe asks if Shun came back for her. Yan quickly says no, that Shun returned to finish his studies because he received a scholarship years ago, but he stopped studying since then. Yan praises Shun and flirts a bit, causing Joe to leave in frustration. However, later that night, Yan tries to make up for it. Joe asks her to play a question and answer game, and she's upset, wondering if he still doesn't trust her. He tells her he'll ask her questions about himself. He asks her what qualities of his made her fall in love with him. She says he's handsome, smart, hardworking, and famous, but if he could reduce his anger, he would be even more perfect. Joe tells Yen that he loves her, and from now on, she belongs to him, and he belongs only to her. A little while later, Shia arrives at Joe's house with a gift for him, but he's not interested and asks her to leave. He tells her he doesn't eat sweets, but she pretends to be thirsty and asks for a drink. While Joe is away, she sneaks into his room and looks for Yan, who is hiding behind the curtain. Joe catches her and tells her to leave, saying what she's doing is wrong. He forces Yan out of the room and tells Shia to throw away her gift. Meanwhile, Joe celebrates his birthday with Han, and he finally admits his love for her, which she reciprocates. Joe decides to buy a gift for Yen but doesn't find anything he likes. The shopkeeper suggests he make something himself, and since Koreans are skilled at crafting, he creates a gold bracelet for her. Meanwhile, Yen is still trying to fix her scooter and calls a mechanic, who tells her the engine is old and has water damage. Motsi confirms that the mechanic isn't helping and suggests he get her a new engine. Back to Joe, he's preparing a romantic setup for Yen with flowers and balloons, planning to propose to her. However, he calls Yen because she's late due to being busy with a fashion project and not hearing her phone. During this time, Shia calls Joe, saying she loves him more than Yen. She then pretends to argue with someone and asks Joe to come pick her up. Joe agrees to help her, and when they arrive at his place, Shia asks to change her clothes because if she goes back to the dorm looking like this, the supervisor will know she's been drinking and throw her out. He agrees. Once at his house, he tells her to change quickly and leave, but she's surprised by the setup he's prepared and realizes that he's planning to propose to Yen. She continues to act distracted and eventually changes into the t-shirt Joe bought for Yen. When she comes out wearing it, Joe gets angry and tells her to change it, but she breaks down in tears. She tells him she can change for him and hugs him tightly, not letting go until she finishes what she has to say. Joe tries to push her away, but can't. He finally gives in and listens to her. At that moment, Yen arrives, and as always, she walks in at the wrong time and misunderstands the situation. Yen sees them and starts crying. Shia, upon seeing her, pretends to be surprised. When Joe realizes what's happening, he pushes Shia away from him. She tells him not to follow Yen and that he must love her. Joe yells at Shia and tells her to go change her shirt. He leaves her and rushes to catch up with Yen, but Shia goes wild, smashing things in the house. Yen walks down the street thinking that Joe is cheating on her, and she's crying. Joe follows her, trying to catch up, but she gets into a taxi and he can't reach her. He returns home feeling upset and holds the bracelet he had bought for her. He's frustrated about how the day went wrong because of Shia. Meanwhile, Yen returns home devastated. She takes a shower in her clothes, hoping to calm down, and tells herself that Joe is a cheater, so she shouldn't cry for him. The next day, Yen wakes up with a swollen face from all the crying. She tries to cover it up with makeup, but can't hide the puffiness. Her friend asks if someone hit her, but Yen lies and says she stayed up all night working on the competition. In truth, she didn't stop crying. Her friend asks again if someone hurt her, but Yen insists that no one did. She then leaves to go to university because she gets a call from Sean to meet him. She meets Sean, who compliments her. She's still struggling with her design, but he helps her finish it. She thanks him and tells him he deserves his title, but he says he deserves her more. Yen notices this but ignores it. Meanwhile, Joe tries to express his love for her and says he loves a kind and beautiful girl. She thinks he's talking about his colleague. She's confused, not realizing he's talking about her, and he asks if Joe likes her. She says yes, but notices that she's upset when he mentions Joe's name. Sean sees this and tells her he can tell she's upset, and takes her by the hand to cheer her up by going out. Joe goes to Motsi's place and rings the doorbell. He remembers Yen, thinking that's why Motsi was happy, but when he sees him, he turns his face away. Motsi asks about Yen, and Joe tells him she didn't come. Motsi asks what happened since everything was supposed to be fine. Meanwhile, Sean takes Yen to an amusement center, where they have fun playing together until they get tired. Joe waits for Yen outside her house, and when he sees her laughing with Sean, he gets frustrated. Sean suggests that they visit Yen's family because she hasn't seen them in a long time, and they must miss her. Yen initially disagrees, but when she sees Joe, she decides to go with Sean, deliberately ignoring Joe's feelings. The jealousy builds in Joe, and instead of trying to make things right, he yells at Yen. He asks why she hasn't answered his calls, and Yen responds sarcastically, saying she's too busy. Joe gets frustrated and accuses her of going out with Sean but not responding to him. Yen retorts, saying she can go out with whoever she wants, just like Joe goes out with Shia. Joe tries to explain himself, but she doesn't believe him and continues to argue. Motsi finds the situation amusing and tells Joe to leave Yen alone. Joe gets even more angry and says that Yen is his girlfriend. Motsi teases him, saying it was in the past and now he's the one responsible for her. Joe enters Yen's house, but he later meets Motsi again and they go play tennis to release the tension. Motsi advises Joe to stop being angry and go to Yen, as their Cold War will only asks if it's possible to change the judges in the competition. But his aunt tells him that it's too late for that, and we learn that Joe's family is involved in organizing the competition. We return to Joe, who has lost hope of keeping Sean away. He decides to go to Yen, but before he leaves, his aunt tells him not to come back next time alone. Yan is preparing her bag to go to her grandmother's house. Her friend asks if she's planning to escape from Joe, but Yan says she's just going for 2 days to change her mood. However, her friend warns her that the distance between her and Joe will make things worse, and the misunderstandings will only grow. She advises Yan to talk things through with him. Yan responds, saying they can talk when she returns. As soon as she steps out, she finds Joe standing in front of her. He asks where she's going and that he wants to talk to her. She tells him she's not free, as she's going out with Sean. Sean arrives and takes her away, and Joe, remembering Motzi's advice not to leave them alone, decides to follow them in his car. Joe follows them all the way. When Sean notices this, he considers getting into a chase, but is stopped by Yan, who tells him to focus on the road. They finally arrive at the grandmother's village, and Joe is still trailing behind. Yan goes to greet her grandmother and mentions Sean. Joe enters and introduces himself to the grandmother, saying he is Yan's boyfriend. The grandmother is happy and greets him, but Joe warns her not to believe him because he's lying and is the reason he's upset Yan. The grandmother says he doesn't seem like someone who would upset anyone. He looks too cute, and it's probably Yan who made him upset. Grandmothers always try to play matchmaker. She invites them all into her house. Later, we see Joe trying to enter Yan's room. At that moment, Sean comes out and tells Joe that she's not inside. If Joe wants to know where she is, he'll have to try harder. Joe refuses, so Sean challenges him, teasing him with a sickle, which is his name, by the way, suggesting they go with him to the field to pick fruit. When they reach Yan's place and the grandmother sees Joe holding the sickle, she asks why he has it. Sean explains that Joe doesn't know much about their life. Joe quickly drops the sickle, but Sean seizes the opportunity to tell the grandmother that Joe is easily upset. This gives the grandmother a wrong impression of Joe. Sean continues to tease Joe, getting him to pick fruit they don't need, but Joe realizes what's going on just in time and runs after Sean to catch him. When they return to the house, the grandmother and Yan laugh at them. At bedtime, the grandmother tells Yan there's only one room because she thought Yan was coming alone. Yan tells her she'll sleep with her, but Joe and Sean have to share a room. Neither of them agrees, and Sean suggests that Joe stay at a nearby hotel. Joe tells him he can book the hotel for him. The grandmother notices the tension between them and asks Yan what's going on. Yan dismisses it, saying they're crazy. She suggests they sleep while the two of them finish arguing. She gives them one small blanket and leaves them to fight over it, their voices becoming so loud that the grandmother gets startled and asks what they're doing. Yan tells her not to worry. They'll sleep soon. The next day, Yan goes with Sean to finish her drawing, but they don't notice that Joe is quietly watching them, feeling uneasy about what's happening. Yan, feeling like she's being watched, looks around and spots Joe. She calls out to him to distract him because she knows he's been following them. Joe, seeing them happy together, leaves the area. Sean returns with Yan to the house and the grandmother asks them to prepare for dinner. Yan is surprised when the grandmother refers to the three of them as a group. Yan asks her if Joe has left and her friend replies that she thought he had left with them in the morning. Yan starts to worry about him, thinking he might have gotten lost. She goes out to look for him. She checks the place where he parked his car, but she's shocked to find he's not there. She continues searching around the village, hoping he might have gone for a walk, but still can't find him. Meanwhile, Motzi is trying to find a new engine for his car. After some time, he finds one at a car shop. He goes to call Yan, telling her that he has a surprise for her. She's happy when she sees the engine. They go inside to inquire about the price, but the shop owner shocks them by saying that the engine is for display, not for sale, as it's rare, and they stopped producing it. Motzi gets into trouble when the shop owner reminds him of a time when he mistakenly put water in the engine instead of oil. The shop owner had warned him that it would break down, but Motzi denies it. The man insists that he saw it happen. Yan realizes the engine's failure was caused by Motzi and argues with him, walking off while he tries to explain, but she refuses to listen. Back with Yan, she's still looking for Joe around the village but can't find him. She remembers that someone had been sketching a scene there and guesses it might have been Joe. She heads back to the spot, continuing her search, but still doesn't find him. However, when she steps on a box and opens it, she finds a gold bracelet with 2 initials on it, one for her and the other for Joe. She then sees Joe searching for something and realizes he's looking for the box. She hides it and calls out to him. He's happy to see her looking for him, but she says that it was her grandmother who insisted she look for him. Joe gets upset and says he'll go back alone as he knows the way. He resumes searching for the box, and Yan calls out to him, showing him the box. He's relieved and happy to find it. Sean arrives at the scene and starts looking for them too. Joe asks Yen why she's looking for him if she doesn't care about him. She responds by asking why he followed her. Joe says he didn't want to stay home and leave her alone with Sean. He tells her that he's her boyfriend, so he should be the one visiting her home, not Sean. Yan laughs at him, noticing how obvious his jealousy is. Joe tries to explain what happened with Shia, saying he didn't hug her. She was the one who held on to him. Yan tells him she never thought of it that way. He asks if she understands that there's nothing going on between him and Shia. She tells him she's upset, but it's not because of what he's thinking. She's upset because he allowed her to wear his t-shirt. She says he's trying to make it up to her, without understanding what she's truly upset about. She tells him she trusts him and is sure he's not interested in that woman. Finally, they reconcile, and Joe gives her a gift, promising he won't make her upset again. She also tells him that she will try to calm down a bit. They hug, and in that moment, Sean arrives, looking upset when he sees that they've reconciled. The next day, they say goodbye to the grandmother as they are heading back for the competition. Joe promises her that they will return to spend more time with her. Yayan tells him she's worried about her living alone at her age. Joe promises that after they're married, he'll bring her to live with them. Yan is happy to hear this, as she feels she made the right choice. On their way back, Sean continues to joke around with them. Yan returns home and finds Lu, who seems to be annoyed as she's cleaning a house that is already clean. Lu asks her what's wrong, but Yan can tell that she's upset, so she says nothing. Yan then remarks that it's clear Lu has separated from Motzi, but Lu brushes it off, saying that they were never really together in the first place. Yan walks off before Lu can get upset with her. It's competition day, and everyone is getting ready. Lu sees Motzi looking for her, so she walks away and tells Yan to tell anyone who asks that she didn't come. Lu runs off and Motzi chases after her. Yin realizes that they are both upset with each other. She meets Joe and asks him to go help Yan. Joe finds her talking with Sean, and it's revealed that someone is secretly taking pictures of them. Joe steps in and asks Sean to go prepare for the competition while he helps Yan. Yan is confused, not understanding why Joe is acting the way he is, but she doesn't realize that Sean has feelings for her. The competition begins and participants present their work. When it's time to announce the results, Sean is the one to announce them, and Yen wins the competition. However, one of the participants protests the results, accusing Sean and Yen of being involved in a relationship. She shows the audience the photo she secretly took of them backstage. Sean denies her claims, saying that there were other judges who assessed the competition. The participant insists that if Sean had given her higher marks, she would have won. Sean shows her the evaluations, and his score for Yin is actually the lowest. He tells her that her work is fine, but her morals are not those of an artist, and she will never win with such behavior. Joe steps in to end the argument, announcing that the competition will be reset for Yan. If she submits a new design in 30 minutes, she will be declared the winner. Everyone agrees, and Sean steps down from the judging panel. Yan manages to submit an even more impressive and innovative design, earning her the title of competition winner. Meanwhile, Motzi is still chasing after Lu, who leaves Yen alone. But Joe takes Yen to celebrate, with Sean tagging along and continuing to argue with them about which restaurant to choose. Joe doesn't want Sean to join, but Yen intervenes and suggests that they all go together. She insists that wherever the first restaurant they come across is, they will eat there. They finally reach a restaurant, and Yen leaves to go to the restroom. Later, Sean starts teasing Joe, telling him that he will choose the food that Yan likes. Joe responds, saying that Yan will eat whatever he picks. Sean then proposes a bet to see who will win. Joe agrees, and they continue to bicker, with Sean trying to get Yan to sit next to him. But Joe comes up with a plan that we'll find out about shortly. Yen returns to them, and Sean asks her to sit next to him. However, she wants to sit next to Joe, but Sean pulls her toward him. After a while, Yen moves to sit next to Joe because the air conditioning behind her is too cold. We find out that Joe is the one who set it up that way, as Yen doesn't like air conditioning. Joe teases Sean, and when Yen picks the same food choice as Joe, Sean feels even more teased. Joe then says, "I'm the one who understands Yen, not you," while Sean remains confused. They continue drinking until Joe gets a little tipsy and starts singing, not aware of his surroundings. He doesn't even know where he's staying. Yan pleads with Joe to take him to his place, and Joe agrees. When they arrive, Yan asks him to get her some clothes from his room and help her change. Joe leads her to the room and tells her to stay inside so he can change in privacy. That night, Joe is unable to sleep because he's worried about Yan, knowing he's not in full control of his actions. He leaves to check on her and locks the door behind him. The next morning, Joe wakes up startled to find himself with Yan asleep in his arms. He nudges her, and yells at Sean for ending up next to him. Sean explains that he was disoriented and mistook Joe's place for his own. Joe tells him to get out, saying he needs to clean up. Sean asks, "Are you kicking me out without clothes?" Joe replies that he also needs to show Yan what Sean did to him. He grabs Sean by the collar and pushes him out of the room, locking the door behind him. Yan wakes up to the noise of them arguing, but is surprised to find that Joe has locked her out. She knocks until Joe hears her and opens the door. She asks why he locked her in, and Joe explains that he was worried because Sean had been drinking. Yan then asks where Sean went and learns that Joe told him to leave. Yan is upset with Joe and tells him that he should have given Sean some money instead of making him leave. Meanwhile, Sal is discussing with her friends about the upcoming student elections and how they need to support Joe for him to win. A video honoring someone plays, but they mistake it for something else. One of her friends mentions a relative in the College of Fine Arts who might know whether Yan was involved. Sal encourages her friend to stay on top of it until they find out who Yan really is. Mutsi is waiting for Lu, hoping to make up with her by giving her a new gift, a newer version of the one she had. However, Lu refuses to accept it, saying that no gift can replace the one from her father. She tells Motsi to stay away from her because she can't trust him or fall for his words. She asks him why he's doing that. Motsi explains that he wanted to spend time with her, but he didn't realize things would end up this way. Lu tells him that he can't expect everything to be handed to him immediately. Some things take time, and he should understand that not everything can be solved quickly. She tells him she can't be with someone like him, spoiled and without a sense of responsibility. She warns him not to come near her again, leaving him alone, feeling hurt by her words. Motsi later meets Joe and tells him about his failed attempts to reconcile with Lu. He admits that all his efforts to make up with her have failed, and that it's his own fault. He acknowledges that he has hurt many girls in the past, which is why he deserves what is happening to him with Lu. Joe reassures him that as long as he's learned his lesson, he can change. He advises Motsi not to give up and to keep trying because it's not too late, and Lu still cares for him. Joe tells him to head home early and not drink too much. Back at home, Yan is waiting for Joe but pretends to be upset. She walks in as soon as he arrives, and Joe keeps calling her to come eat, but she pretends to ignore him. Eventually, Joe convinces her to eat with him. The next day, Motsi visits the shop owner he lied to and tries to convince him to give him the engine, but the man refuses, explaining that the engine is broken. Motsi learns the truth and tells the man that he wanted to buy it, but it's no longer working. Motsi tells the mechanic that he wants the engine even though it's broken. The mechanic is surprised and asks why. Motsi explains that his girlfriend, the one he was with last time, is the owner of the engine that got damaged, and because of that they broke up. The mechanic laughs and says, "If I were her, I would have beaten you up." But he also acknowledges that Motsi seems to have realized his mistake, so he agrees to sell him the engine. He even gives Motsi the contact of someone who might be able to fix it. Motsi thanks him for his help. We then return to Yan, who is talking with her sister. Her sister invites her to meet her at a cafe, but Yan is surprised when Joe arrives at the same cafe, intending to meet her as well. It turns out that Joe and her sister had planned this as a way to reconcile Joe with Yan, even though they weren't actually fighting. They decide to go along with the plan to avoid suspicion. While they drink coffee, Joe asks Yan about her relationship with Sean. She explains that Sean used to be their neighbor and is younger than her. His parents were never really involved in his life, so he became a lonely and withdrawn person. Because of this, she tried to get close to him and help him overcome his loneliness. She says she considers him like a little brother, so Joe shouldn't worry. While they're talking, Yan receives a call from Sean asking to meet her. She tells Joe that she's going to go, and she leaves. However, she forgets her bag with Joe, so he follows her. Next, Motsi goes to the mechanic to ask if he can fix the engine. The mechanic tells him that the engine is completely broken and can't be fixed. He says it would take too long, and he's too busy to handle it. Motsi asks if the mechanic would be willing to train him to fix it himself. The mechanic suggests Motsi buy a new one instead, which would save him time. Motsi feels frustrated by the conversation. Back to Yan with Sean, who gives her a collection of design books, and they continue joking around. However, Joe sees them, and jealousy overtakes him. He walks over and starts mocking Sean. Yan tells Joe to stop, but he continues, saying, "Look at how he treats me." Yan tells Joe to stop taking advantage of situations to twist things and cause trouble. When neither of them agrees, Yan leaves, leaving them both behind. The next day at the university, there's a competition between Joe and Hong from the engineering department, who is Joe's rival for the student union election. Since Joe beat him in a basketball match, Hong is upset and wants to get revenge. During the match, each department cheers for their team. In the end, Joe manages to win against Hong, which only increases Hong's hatred toward him. Hong then challenges Joe to a rematch, claiming he is confident that he will win this time. Joe accepts the challenge, but Hong's tone is suspicious, suggesting he has something else planned. Matzi, meanwhile, tries to get Yan to reconcile with Lu. Yan tells him to open a fortune slip and see what it says. When Matzi opens the slip, it says that the first person to walk through the door will be his destiny. It turns out that it's Yan who enters, but just before she can reach him, Joe enters first. Matzi tells him, "This is the last time you follow your own rules." Yan tells him that this is the consequence for his actions and warns him not to hurt Lu again. We then see Shin trying to get close to Joe, but Joe tells her to stay away. She insists that she wants him to forgive her and that if she needs to apologize to Yan, she will. She says that all that matters to her is his happiness. Joe, however, warns her to stay away from Yan, or he'll handle things differently. He walks away, leaving Shin upset and jealous of Yan. At night, Lu and Yan meet and both vent about their boyfriends. However, Yan thinks Lu is talking about her. When Yan asks who she's referring to, Lu doesn't respond, not wanting her to know that she's talking about Matzi. But Yan already knows that it's been a long time since Lu and Matzi have been struggling. Matzi is in the library, trying to learn how to fix the engine. However, despite all the books he has gathered, he can't seem to figure anything out. Back to Yan, who tries to catch Matzi in a lie, but he tries to deflect the conversation. Yan asks if she and Joe have a fan group, and Yan confirms that they do. She shows her the comments of someone who always supports Yan and her relationship with Joe. Yan says she's sure Joe is the one writing these comments. At night, Joe is waiting for Yan, but she's late. He's getting frustrated because she still hasn't returned home. He goes to take a shower, leaving the door open. Meanwhile, Matzi is still trying to find a solution to his problem and wants to learn how to fix engines. He sees Gio, who tells him that what he's doing isn't right because Matzi has spread books all over the floor. Gio remembers Yen's words about Joe being the best person in the electronic engineering department and gets the idea to have Joe fix the engine. He offers to help him with his library job in exchange for a small favor, which Matzi will learn about later. Gio agrees without even knowing what the favor is. Finally, Yen returns home and sneaks in to avoid Joe noticing her. She feels relieved to find him in the shower, so she enters his room and tries to access his computer. However, she can't figure out the password. She remembers a word Joe used to repeat often and the username of the person who supports her in the fan group. Just as she figures it out, Joe walks in and catches her. He asks what she's doing, and she lies, saying she just wanted to use his computer for studying. He then tells her the password, and she realizes it's the same as the username on the website. She tells him that she figured it out, and he warns her not to tell anyone. He asks her about her alias in the fan group, and laughs at the name sheet. The next day at university, Sal informs Shin that Yan, who they thought was Han, won the design competition and is being praised by everyone. Shin is surprised because no one knew Han had a twin sister who is also in the same university. She also mentions that she had a feeling something was off with Han's behavior, and asks Sal to keep a close eye on her and report anything unusual. Meanwhile, Sean is sitting and sketching when his manager enters and informs him about an upcoming exhibition. He's worried Sean might refuse, but Sean easily agrees to hold the space for himself. The time for the sparring match between Joe and Hong approaches. Each department cheers for their own competitor, hoping they'll win. However, it's clear that Hong is planning something. He tells Joe that he's sure he'll beat him without a doubt. Throughout the match, Joe manages to stay ahead and beats Hong in every round. But suddenly, Hong falls to the ground and accuses Joe of cheating and intentionally hurting him so that he couldn't win. He claims it's part of Joe's plan to ruin his chances in the student union election. Joe reviews all his movements and realizes he didn't do anything wrong. However, the referee reprimands Joe, saying he was wrong, and orders Hong's friends to take him to the clinic. Joe is devastated because now everyone sees him as a cheater. At home, Yen is preparing dinner for Joe when she gets a call from Gio, telling her about what happened with Joe. She becomes worried and decides to go to him. When she arrives, she learns the reason for his delay and finds Joe sitting and replaying the match in his mind. He keeps trying to find something he might have done wrong, but each time he recalls the movements, he realizes he didn't make any mistakes. Hong was the one faking it to ruin Joe's reputation. At that moment, Yan arrives, surprising Joe, but he recognizes her. She asks him to teach her how to play sparring, and he agrees, teaching her while she lightens the mood with jokes to comfort him, as she can tell he's upset. The next day, Motzi and Gio go to Joe to tell him that Hong is slandering him online, but Joe says he isn't concerned, as it was just an accident. Motzi insists that there's more to it and that the real reason Hong is doing this is to ruin Joe's chances in the election. Joe brushes it off, saying, "It's just a university election and it doesn't matter to him." He leaves the conversation and walks away. But Gio and Motzi decide to uncover the truth about the situation without Joe knowing. Yan is sitting, watching the sparring match between Joe and Hong, but she doesn't understand the rules. Joe arrives, and she asks him if he knows the rules of the game. He tells her that he studied it for 2 years abroad and knows it well. She asks if injuries in this game can be dangerous, and he explains that injuries are very rare in sparring because they are well protected. She shows him the video of the match, and he tells her that it's clear that the opponent deliberately fell. She realizes that Hong is faking it to ruin Joe's reputation because he wants to win the elections, and the only way to do that is by gaining the sympathy of the students by making Joe appear as a cheater. Meanwhile, Motzi is observing Hong and realizes that he is faking. Hong had managed to kick the ball well, but then pretended to fall again when students walked by him. Motzi decides to expose his act, and Yun agrees to help him. They go to the clinic to check on Hong's condition, but the doctor tells them that he didn't come to the clinic and went to an outside hospital. However, this is difficult for them since external hospitals don't release patient information. They decide to follow Hong to gather more evidence. They track him to the cafe where he's hanging out with his friends, and Motzi deliberately starts a fight with him to expose his lie while Yan films everything. They succeed in exposing his deception when he drops his crutch, then rushes to grab it before anyone notices, running away from the scene. Yan and Motzi leave after capturing the video. Back at Joe's house, Yan shows him the video she recorded of Hong faking the injury. She tells him that Hong is trying to ruin his reputation to win the election. Joe insists that he doesn't want her to upload the video, even though she feels Hong deserves it for cheating to win. She asks why he won't let her post it, but Joe says that a person who wins fairly will never have a problem, and he isn't like Hong to resort to such tactics. Yan agrees that Joe is a good person for forgiving Hong, even though he could have hurt him, and she promises not to post the video. However, Joe warns her that Hong won't stay quiet, and his popularity is growing every day. Yan assures him that she will handle it, but she won't share the video. She asks Sean how many fans he has online, and he tells her that he has over 5 million followers. She jokingly wonders if she's asking for a favor. Yan then goes to meet Hong after getting Gio to talk to him. She tells him that she wants to speak with him, and he thinks she has feelings for him. Yan tells him to sit down because she wants to show him something. She plays the video of him walking normally, proving that he faked his injury. Hong gets angry, accusing them of conspiring against him. Yan tells him that he started this, and now he has to face the consequences. He asks what she will do with the video, and she says she will post it so everyone knows about his lie. He accuses Joe of encouraging her to do this, but Yan clarifies that it's because of Joe that the video hasn't been uploaded yet. Hong asks her if she won't post the video. What does she want from him? Yan replies that she is there to warn him. If he tries to harm Joe, she will post it. The next day, Yan gathers her friends and Sean to design a set of t-shirts, intending to donate them to charity as part of the campaign activities for Joe's election. Joe joins them to help with the designs, but he's feeling upset. He says that once Joe arrives, they forget about everything else. Yan goes to him to help with the drawing, especially since he's the one who made all of this possible. Afterward, they head to the university, wearing the t-shirts they've designed. They also bring a large number of them to sell, as part of a charity project. Joe and Sean bet on who will sell the most. Sean sells the first t-shirt to a girl. Since he's a famous artist, everyone wants to buy from him. Joe continues to talk about the cause, mentioning that all proceeds from today's sales will be donated. He successfully sells his first t-shirt with ease, and together, they manage to sell all the t-shirts. The next day, it's election day. Joe gives his speech, and everyone cheers him on. Afterward, he heads home, where he finds Yan celebrating with him, congratulating him for beating Hong. Joe gives her a store ownership contract because he wants her to start her own business and have her own brand. However, Yan refuses, telling him that she wants to reach her dream on her own and isn't currently thinking of opening a physical store. She's happy with her online shop for now. Meanwhile, Motzi is fixing a scooter with Gio. Gio warns him that he's exhausted from yesterday and might have an accident, but Motzi insists he's fine and can handle it. Unfortunately, Motzi crashes and breaks his arm. Gio tells him he had warned him, but Motzi didn't listen, and he calls for an ambulance. Yan is leaving her house when she meets Yao at the door. Yao tells her about Mozi's accident and asks if she wants to go with her to check on him, but Yan hesitates, thinking that Mozi might just be pretending. Yan insists that despite Mozi's carelessness, he truly cares for her, and the reason for his injury is that he spent the whole night fixing the scooter. Yan gives her the room number where Mozi is staying and leaves. In the hospital, Mozi has his arm in a cast, and Yan and Joe are with him, feeding him. Yan comes to the hospital with food for him but doesn't want to go inside. However, when Yan sees her, she steps out and invites her in. Yao tells her that she just wanted to confirm Yan's story, and then she gives her the food, asking her not to tell Mozi that it was from her. Afterward, Yan goes inside and gives the food to Mozi, telling him that it's from Yao. Mozi is happy and finishes it, appreciating that she cooked for him. Later, Yan visits Yao and tells her that Mozi thanked her for the food. Yao says, "I told you not to tell him it was from me." Yan tells her that she wants to open a real shop to sell her designs because Joe bought her a store, but it's expensive, so she rejected. However, she still likes the idea. Since they've been successful with their online store, she's confident they can succeed in a physical store as well. Yan suggests they search for a more affordable place. They begin searching online and list all the potential stores. Yan's task is to go visit the locations and make a decision. Yan visits several shops, but none of them are suitable. One day, as she's heading home after a long search, her scooter breaks down and she has to walk. Suddenly, she feels a sharp stomach pain, and at that moment, Sean runs into her. He asks her if she's okay, and she tells him that her stomach hurts a bit. Sean takes Yan to his gallery to have a warm drink. There, Yan sees all his paintings that he'll be showcasing in the exhibition, and they are all about her and the time they spent together. Sean makes her a drink and asks why Joe isn't with her, suggesting that he's been neglecting her. Yan tells him that it's her fault because she hasn't eaten all day. Soon after Joe arrives, Yan had asked him to come so she could talk to him. Sean tells Yan to wait in the car while he talks to Joe. Sean wants to talk to Joe about neglecting Yan and says that she could have fainted on the way. He tells Joe that if he can't take care of her, he should leave her to him. Joe asks what Sean means by that, and Sean admits that he's loved Yan for a long time and is willing to fight for her. Joe warns Sean to stay away from his girlfriend Yan. Joe then heads to the car, feeling upset. Yan asks him if he's upset that she spoke with Sean, but Joe says that she should take better care of herself and not neglect her health because he's worried about her. He doesn't want her to get sick. He carries her back to the house, and Yan jokes, saying that it's her stomach that's hurting, not her legs. He insists on carrying her to give her rest, and prepares a drink to ease her pain and help her sleep. The next day, Yan wakes up and looks for some fast food, but she's surprised to find that Joe has hidden it from her. She's not allowed to eat junk food while she's feeling unwell. Joe catches her while she's searching for it and tells her she needs to eat clean and nutritious food for now. He gives her a drink to ease the pain, and she drinks it. The following day, Yan is working on her design. She gets a call about a shop that's available for rent. She's excited and rushes to check it out. The place is large and spacious, but the rent is surprisingly low for its size, which makes Yan suspicious that something might be wrong. The owner explains that he has marital issues and needs to rent it out temporarily. He assures her that once the issues are resolved, he'll regain control of the shop. Yan likes the place, but asks for the contract so she can review it. The owner gives her the contract and tells her to call him once she's done. Meanwhile, Sean is at home talking to Yan, asking her to go out to dinner as he promised. However, Yan says she's busy with Joe that night, but assures him she'll attend his exhibition. After their conversation, Sean's manager arrives with some good news. Sean has been accepted to study abroad. Sean is happy about the news, but is shocked to learn that he has to leave immediately after the exhibition. He tells his manager that he'll think about it because he's unsure, but his manager insists that it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and that Sean shouldn't give up his dream just for an uncertain love with Yan. Sean is deeply affected by this, torn between his dream of studying abroad and his love for Yan, which doesn't have guarantees. Back with Yan, she keeps telling Joe what to do whenever she finds him doing something. And like any man who understands women, Joe tells her to get to the point and tell him what she wants. She shows him the contract for the shop she's considering renting and asks him to review it because she feels there's something off. Joe assumes he already reviewed it, and then he realizes that he had arranged for the shop to be rented out to her at the price she wanted without her knowing, as a way of helping her without her rejecting his help. Joe reassures her that the contract is fine, and there's nothing wrong with it. Yan receives a call from her friend asking about the key to her scooter, which she didn't take. She suspects that Mozi might have taken it since he was fixing it for her, and today, he was supposed to return it. Mozi arrives, bringing back Yan's scooter. He tells her that he's finally fixed it. He thinks she's going to thank him, but instead she tells him firmly, 1. I don't like this playboy behavior. 2. Don't do anything without my permission. 3. I could leave you at any time if you make a mistake. Motsi, happy, asks if they're good now. She agrees but reminds him to follow her rules. They reconcile, and everything seems to be back on track. Later, Yan and Joe attend Sean's exhibition. Yan tells Joe that Sean invited her as an honored guest. Joe admires Sean's paintings, especially the ones that depict beautiful moments. Suddenly, Joe's phone rings. It's Motsi, who tells him that Yan finally agreed to let him love her. Motsi is so loud that Joe has to step outside to speak to him. He tells Yin to stay inside while he talks. Meanwhile, Yin continues to look at the paintings which feature her childhood memories with Sean. Suddenly the lights go out, and only one room is lit, gathering everyone, including Yin. She finds a painting of herself from when they were in the village together. Sean walks out, holding a bouquet of flowers. He tells Yin that this exhibition is his graduation project, and that everything in it is about her, him, and their youth. He admits that he knows she sees him only as a friend, but wants her to know that he's been in love with her for a long time. He asks her if she would accept his love. Yan declines and refuses him. Sean says he knew this would happen, but he had to try his luck. Just as Yan is about to respond, the lights go out completely. Joe enters the room, takes Yin by the hand, and leaves without anyone noticing. Yan stops him and apologizes, explaining that she was warned many times about Sean's feelings for her, which is why she's ready to accept any punishment from Joe. Joe tells her that it's not her fault. It's just that he had to take action this way because Sean is more famous and everyone knows his story. This would expose Yan's and her sister's personal lives, and Joe was afraid of that. He didn't want her to go through that. The next day at the university, a video of Sean and Yan spreads on the internet, and everyone is talking about how well they look together. Joe overhears the conversations and is upset. He asks the forum administrator to remove the video, but she argues that it's just a normal video, and everyone is allowed to love who they want. Joe explains that the girl in the video is his girlfriend, and that she doesn't want the video to be shared. He threatens to take legal action for defamation, which causes the administrator to remove it. Sal shows the video to Shin, which she had recorded before it was deleted. Shin notes that Yan isn't wearing earrings, but the girl in the video is, so she wonders if Yan might have taken her sister's place when she was sick. Sal recalls that Yan was ill, as she found out from the doctor's call. The two of them plan to uncover Yan's secret. Meanwhile, Yan and her friends are busy preparing the shop, and everyone is working happily. Once they finish, Joe's aunt arrives and almost exposes him in front of Yen. She was about to say that the shop belongs to Joe, but Joe manages to stop her just in time. Yen shows her the shop, and the aunt is surprised by its low rent. She becomes even more puzzled about why it's priced this way, but unfortunately she doesn't keep up with the lie. The general manager enters, and due to his carelessness, he exposes everything. Yan decides to return the shop, but the aunt tells her it wasn't Joe's fault, and that she was the one who came up with the idea. Yen explains that she's not upset. On the contrary, she's happy that Joe is helping her. But this project is her dream, and she wants to achieve it on her own. Joe's aunt admits that he made the right choice, and she offers to buy shares in the shop. She also agrees to deduct the cost of the setup from the rent, which makes Yan very happy, and she agrees. Meanwhile, Sean sits drinking and reflecting. He drinks and thinks. What does he remember? His days with Yen, the one who didn't care about him? But we leave him and go back to Joe, who returns to his house but doesn't find Yen. She is at Lowe's, busy preparing designs for the opening. Joe calls Motsi to ask if he knows where she is. Motsi tells him that Yan is confused, not knowing how to design. Joe heads to her, leaving a cup of coffee at her door, with a message asking her to meet him on the rooftop. When Yan goes up, she finds that he's prepared a romantic dinner for her. He says, "You forgot your promise to take care of your health?" He feeds her and pampers her, making us all a little jealous. But he gives her some advice on the spot, telling her that inspiration doesn't come by force. She just needs to focus a little, and she'll find it everywhere around her. We move to Sean, who is still crying over his lost love. His manager, Aang, enters and scolds him for what he's doing to himself. Sean tells him that he has decided to forget her and think about his future. Aang is relieved because Sean is now considering his future and plans to travel. We switch to Han, who is in her room talking to Joe. She tells him that she can't go with him to the library because she has missed some classes and needs to catch up before the exams. She doesn't want to add any more responsibilities to her sister. Of course, Sal is in the room with her, listening to everything. Sal is sure that if Han doesn't go, she'll regret it, so she decides to snoop around in Han's things. When Han leaves, Sal finds a medical record related to Han's illness. Meanwhile, Jan has finished preparing the shop, and the grand opening day arrives, which turns out to be a success. Sal, having taken a photo of the medical evidence, shows it to Shin. They both realize that Jan took her sister's place while Han was ill. Sal and Shin decide that they need to expose Jan. So Sal tells Joe that she's going to create a forum for outstanding students. And since Joe is busy with Jan, she asks him to let her handle it. Naturally, Sal is thrilled, as this was her plan all along. Motzi asks Joe why he doesn't want to attend with Jan. Joe says that Jan gets upset when he talks to her, so Motzi teases him, joking that it seems like Jan is controlling him. Later, Joe and Motzi head to Jan and Lo, who are waiting for them to go out together. They ride a train through the fields and then go to a camping site. Finally, we see Joe on a white horse carrying Jan with him, and they share a romantic and beautiful time together. Back at the university, Shin asks the head of the design department to add Jan's name to the list. However, she warns her not to leak the list, as it could cause trouble. The head of the department agrees and does it. Meanwhile, Jan is talking with Lo about their day. Lo comments that her relationship with Joe is perfect, while her relationship with Motzi is a little rocky. But Yen assures her that there's nothing more she could want than what she has now. Soon, Yen receives a message with the list order, and she's shocked to find that her sister is on it and they're listed together. She realizes that it would be risky for them to appear together. Lo suggests that Yen speak to Joe since he's the president of the union and the only one who can help her. Yen tells her that Joe is too busy with his thesis and that it's enough for him to have already helped her with her shop and neglected his studies recently. However, Yen asks Lo to help her change her appearance with makeup so that she doesn't resemble Han too much. Joe is in the library, working on his thesis, when he receives a message from Han telling him what happened and informing him that Yan will take action. Joe immediately rushes to the forum location and searches for Yan, but she's turned her back on him. He goes to the person in charge of the list and asks him to change the order, but the person refuses. Joe insists, saying that he'll take full responsibility for it. Afterward, Shin confronts Yan, pulling her from the line, and accuses her of what she's done. Yan tries to deny it at first, but Shin shows her the photos as proof that Han was in a coma during the time that Yan took her place. Shin gives Yen an ultimatum: either choose the envelope containing the photos that could destroy her sister's future, or the envelope with footage of Joe tampering with the names on the list. Shin tells Yan that ever since she appeared in Joe's life, everything has changed for him, and now everyone is criticizing him. She tells Yen to choose, because one of the things will be exposed in the forum. Just then, Joe arrives and takes the envelope with the medical proof photos. Shin is upset that Joe still wants to sacrifice himself for Yan, but Joe says he loves her, and love is about sacrifice. He assures her that it's not Yan's intention to hurt him, but Shin is still upset, and tears up the envelope with the camera footage. To her surprise, the envelope is empty. She tells Joe that she could never hurt him, but she wanted to help him get rid of Yan because Yan had complicated his life. Shin walks away, leaving them both sad and disappointed. Sal watches this and records a video of Yan confessing everything to Joe. Meanwhile, Han catches up with Yan and takes her from the forum after Joe warns her about Shin's plan. Yan thanks Lo for taking her place. Later, Yan receives a message informing her that Shin has discovered her illness. Joe takes Yan to a pottery workshop where they can make things with their hands and put their names on them. The next day, Yen is with Lo drawing her story with Joe. She tells Lo that she needs to do the same and draw her own story with Motzi, but Lo notices that Yen seems upset about something, so she asks her what's wrong. Yen replies that there is something she needs to finish on her own. What do you think it will be? Keep reading to find out. At the same time, Han is with Joe at the library. She tells him that she's decided to give up the scholarship because it's causing too many problems for her sister. She feels it's time to make up for the suffering Yen has gone through. Joe tells her that he will support whatever decision she makes and will always be there for her. The next day, Yen goes to the university and heads to Han's teacher. She tells him that she is not Han but her older sister, Yan, and that she's going to confess everything. Just then, the university president calls the teacher and asks him to meet with him, so he takes Yan along. It seems like trouble is brewing. As soon as they enter, they find Han there. The university president asks her if she's the one in the video, but Yan interrupts and tells him that she's the one in the video, the one Sal filmed, where she confesses everything about the swap. Each sister begs the university president to expel her and let the other go free. At that moment, Joe, having learned what happened from Motzi and Gio, rushes to the university president's office. Meanwhile, Sean is at Yan's place, trying to reconcile with her before he leaves. However, Lo tells him that she's not home, and he assumes that she doesn't want to meet him. But Lo explains that she is, at the university, taking care of something on her own. The university president now knows everything from Yan, who explained who she is and why she did it. Yan admits that she's the one who made the mistake when her sister was in a coma. She says she'll take full responsibility for what happened. Just as she finishes speaking, Joe arrives in time, and the two sisters are taken out of the office while Joe stays to talk with the president. The president scolds Joe for knowing about the situation and not reporting it. He criticizes him for abusing his position as president of the student union. Joe tries to explain himself, but the president states that while the university doesn't forbid relationships, it won't allow anyone to misuse their position for personal gain. Joe then tells the president that he's ready to accept any punishment if he has to lose his position. But the university president tells Joe that the situation might not end there, and that he could be expelled for a full semester, which would ruin his future because of Yan. Yan is outside, overhearing everything, and she recalls that these are the same words Shin used about her to Yan. She feels that she truly ruined Joe's life, so when he comes out to reassure her, she tells him that she wants to handle it on her own, and that they should take a break from each other. Joe is shocked by her request to separate, and he calls out to her as she walks away, but she hides from him. He eventually meets Sean, who found out about the situation and was about to fight with Joe because it wasn't the right time. When Joe gives up looking for her, he tells her that no matter what she does, he won't let her go. She's his true dream, the one who changed him into a different person. She returns and continues drawing while crying. Meanwhile, Joe is at home, remembering all the moments they shared together. The next day at the university, Yen gives a public speech to the students, confessing everything she did. She tells everyone that she will leave the university. Some students sympathize with her because of the sacrifice she made for her sister, while others only care about the rules and criticize her despite the sacrifice. Later that night, Yan goes to Lo's dorm to collect her things. Joe shows up to try to convince her not to leave, but she refuses to talk to him or even listen. Joe tries to tell her that running away is not the solution, but she tells him that she can't continue with him, and they both end up crying in their separate places. The next day, at the university, Joe gathers the team and assigns each person a task. Lo's task is to prevent Yan from doing anything reckless. Meanwhile, Han's task is to share her and Yian's story on the forum with Gio's help. Joe tells Matzi that his job is to make sure the rumors spread, but without exaggeration. Everyone must know the story of Yan and Han. Joe arrives at their place and tells them that he wants to help them. Then, Lo receives a message from Yan telling her to leave the university. Joe tells the team that their task from now on is to help Yan. So, Lo takes her to their newly opened shop and convinces her not to give up on her main dream, even if she faces some obstacles. This is not the end of her journey. Meanwhile, Joe brings the grandmother from the village to speak with the university president, asking for forgiveness for Yan and Han. Yan is continuing her design work, but Lo tells her that the ending she's drawing won't please people and won't generate any revenue. Yan responds that this is the ending between her and Joe, but Lo refuses and shows her the comments on the university forum, which are all supportive of her and Han. They are happy because the university is defending them, and this could influence the college's decision. Meanwhile, Matzi is with Joe at his house, asking him if what they're doing will help. Joe tells him that even if it doesn't, he'll always stand by Yan and will try to find another solution. At the university, Han's department head is with the president, telling him that they need to give Han a second chance. However, the president says that if they do give her another chance, it will be with conditions. Han is waiting for the teacher outside with Gio and Joe. The teacher comes out and informs them that the university has decided to give Han a second chance, but only if she is in the top 3 student. Otherwise, the scholarship will be withdrawn. They ask about Yan, but the teacher looks at them apologetically. All the students are waiting for the university's decision. Meanwhile, Yan continues her designs, and she receives a phone call from Han. Yan receives a message from Han telling her that the university has decided to forgive her and is investigating the matter. She is advised to thank the university and Joe for his efforts. Yan rushes to Joe's house to apologize to him, but finds Matzi there, who stops her from entering. Matzi tells her that Joe is upset with her and doesn't want to see her again. He says that she can't keep breaking up with him and then returning whenever she feels like it. Joe isn't a toy in her hands. However, Yan responds by sending him a message. She will never break up with him again, and will wait for him for the rest of her life. Yin then goes to the university and meets Joe there. She runs to him, holds his hand, and apologizes, but he pulls away and walks away. She follows him and hugs him, begging for his forgiveness, but he pulls his hand away from her and treats her harshly. He tells her that he's not a game she can leave whenever she wants and return to whenever she wishes. If she thinks that he'll come running back to her when she calls, she's mistaken. He won't wait for her. Ian tells him that she distanced herself from him because she was afraid for him. He tells her that relationships are not like that, and that running away is not always the solution to let the other person succeed. Confrontation is the true solution. He says that their relationship is really over this time and leaves her crying and regretting what she did. Later, Yan sits with Lo, reflecting on what she did, and says that she won't easily give up and let him go. She'll try to make him love her again, and she'll do everything he did to make her love him. That's why she agrees with Lo to have Motzi bring Joe to her. She's prepared fireworks and is ready. Yan calls Motzi to find out if Joe is coming, but Motzi tells her that he's busy studying and won't be able to come. Yan is upset, but says she won't give up and will try again. She works with the fireworks from a distance, and remembers how someone else might confess their love. The next day, she calls Lo and tells her that the first plan failed. Lo asks her what she will do now, and if she will give up easily. Yan replies, "Never. I'll keep going until I win him back." She tells Lo she's going to the library because they have beautiful memories there together. She heads there, and when she sees Joe, he's studying. But when she approaches him, he gets up and changes his book, leaving her to find that he's gone. She leaves the food on the desk and goes after him, but he takes the food and runs away so she won't see him. When she returns, she finds that neither he nor the food is there. Meanwhile, Joe is at tennis practice with Motzi, who tells him that what he's doing to Yin is too much and that she might give up and lose him. Joe says that he watched her yesterday when she was talking to herself, saying that she wouldn't give up until she wins him back. We then see Sean waiting for Yan at the cafe, and we learn that Sean and Joe have agreed to work together to help Yan get Joe back. Yan meets Sean, who advises her about Joe, saying he's a good guy. He tells her that he will be traveling at the end of the week but will return later and hopes to see them together. He tells her not to give up before he returns. Meanwhile, Joe meets with Shin, who tells him that she didn't report Yan. Joe replies that he knows she wouldn't go that low, despite her dislike of Yan, and that this isn't her character. Shin tells him that she will graduate soon and will move on to a bigger world, and that's the real world. For real, she'll realize that everything they went through was just childish games. He leaves her and walks away, but deep down she knows she'll never meet someone like him again. Meanwhile, Yin resorts to her last plan, and she manages to bring Joe to the place where she first accepted his love, the flower garden. The rest of the group is waiting there, hiding. When Joe arrives, he finds that Yan has prepared a romantic setup for him, with many paintings telling their story together. Finally, he reaches her and she tells him that she's not unlucky. Instead, she's found all her happiness in him. She says that she's not his weakness, but that she's stronger with him. She also apologizes for wanting to break up with him and promises to hold on to him forever. She offers him her love this time and asks if he'll accept it, but he tells her that he doesn't like this kind of talk. Yan is upset, thinking that he might refuse to come back to her. But to her surprise, he says that expressing love is a man's role, not a woman's. Finally, they reconcile and everyone congratulates them. I think this was a tough lesson for Yan, who gave up too quickly. It's something we all need to learn from. Don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. Also, activate the bell to stay updated on our new story. See you in the next summary. Go!